only thing that can be patented is an accessory. That is why in taking out a patent you should go to a reputable and experienced firm of patent attorneys and stay clear of quacks who advertise for suckers. You will pay a reputable patent attorney a little more than the quack's advertised price, but the reputable attorney will tell you frankly if your invention is impractical and may even be able to help you to market it. Strangely enough, most of the outstanding inventions were made by outsiders. The principle of the steam engine, as everybody knows, was discovered by James Watt, who got the idea watching the lid of a teakettle jump up and down. It suggested to him an existence of power in steam, and he set about in his crude way figuring out how that power could be harnessed. Out of that invention came our present industrial system. Benjamin Franklin was not an electrician, but he invented the lightning rod. The Eastman Kodak Company paid $100,000 to a man who invented the device which enables you to write on the back of a film after it is exposed. And even the humble brake on a baby carriage was not invented, as you might suppose, by a carriage manufacturer, but by an advertising man in search of an exclusive feature to advertise. So do not feel that just because you do not know all there is to know about a particular product that you cannot find ways to improve it. Strangely enough, a person who is using a thing is often the one to think of an improvement, rather than the man who makes it, and the maker is eager to pay him either a lump sum of cash for the patent or a royalty on it. Improving the appliances and things that you use in your daily work is perhaps the easiest and most practical way to make money on patents. It is not much of a trick to get $1,000 from a large manufacturer for any worthwhile improvement, which you develop and patent. There are 100 ways to make $1,000 right in the kitchen of your home. In spite of the thousands of existing patents, there is still a need of a better can opener, a better close pin, a better bottle opener, and other simple everyday things that are in daily use. As a rule, simple inventions are the most profitable. The hump hair pin is a case in point. For years women had been using and losing straight hair pins. The pins fell out of the hair because there was nothing to hold them in. Then some bright fellow thought about putting a little kink in the wire. It was so simple it seemed unimportant. Yet a great business has been built up in Chicago, and millions of dollars have been made on hump hair pins. On the other hand, this same chap might have spent years inventing a dishwashing machine, only to find after inventing it that people had to be educated to wash dishes by machine and that there were already a dozen on the market. If you are of an inventive or deductive turn of mind, and have an ambition to make some money on a patent, first be sure your market exists before spending time and money on an invention. Of the large number of patents issued annually, a portion are taken out by corporations to protect their development work in improving upon their products, or their production methods and apparatus, which have already been more or less approved in the market. Often corporations will also take out patents on alternatives or substitutes which they do not intend to exploit, but merely to hold, to forestall competitors adopting them. But of the other patents, those issued to freelance inventors, perhaps 9 out of 10 patents are on inventions which prove to be of practically no commercial importance. Generally, this is not so much because the invention lacks merit as because there is an inadequate commercial field for it. There are many reasons why the commercial field for an invention may be inadequate. Expense of manufacture may be too great to bring the selling price of the invention down to profitable production. The cost of merchandising may be too great in cases where the article invented cannot be standardized and requires too large an assortment of stock. Often the invention involves a meritorious idea for the particular situations for which it was designed, but the possible users are too few and too scattered to make it practicable to contact and sell them economically. This is particularly true of accessories usable only on particular makes and models of automobiles or on certain types and makes of domestic boilers. In other instances, the cost to a manufacturer of taking over an invention and developing it until it is ready for production may promise to involve so much expenditure that it is difficult to get a manufacturer interested. It is often the high cost of development, which along with the royalty to the inventor must come out of the manufacturing profits, which reduces the revenue an inventor might otherwise get on his patent. Thus, in inventions where the probable cost of development is the least, the inventor has the best chance of realizing a large royalty or lump sum payment for his patent. These difficulties are reviewed not for the purpose of discouraging you from making money by inventing something, but rather to point out other factors than the merit of the invention itself or how well it works, in deciding whether you are going to devote your time and money to a particular invention you may have in mind. The cost of taking out a patent. The cost of securing a patent is one factor of expense which ought to be balanced against the probable reward for your efforts in the event of success, and you must take into consideration that an invention is something of a gamble until the merit of the invention has been demonstrated, and your patent upheld in the courts. To a certain extent, the cost of securing a patent depends upon how complicated the machine or device is. But, on the other hand, the Very simplicity of some inventions makes them more expensive to patent because the attorney has to spend more time in presenting arguments to the patent office to overcome the objection that because the invention is simple it is seemingly obvious. It is seldom possible to have an attorney prepare and file an application for you for less than $100, including the cost of the patent office drawings and the government filing fee of $80. A worthwhile patent nearly always involves some cost of prosecution in getting the patent through the patent office after it has been filed, and before the patent finally issues, another $30 must be paid to the government as a final fee. The total cost of securing a patent, on even the simplest inventions, will be at least $140 or $150 in most instances. Even the average invention will be a little more expensive than this to patent, and if the invention is unusually complicated, the cost of the patent office drawings and the time which the attorney will have to devote to the proper preparation of the application and claims, may increase the total cost of securing such a patent to $300 or even more. Because your income from the invention will probably be due almost entirely to the patent protection you get, it is well to have the services of a competent patent attorney in procuring your patent, as often the value of the patent depends largely upon the skill of the attorney. It is wise to have your patent procured by an attorney of recognized ability, although some other attorney might prepare your application for a lower fee. Incidentally, you will find that being able to confer directly with your patent attorney is going to be of considerable value to you. Air conditioning has brought with it thousands of opportunities for making money. Here is an air-conditioned bed for hay fever sufferers. The next decade should see a great development in air conditioning. Improvements are the most saleable patents. The best way to make money on inventions is to devise improvements for things which you use every day. As a rule, manufacturers are anxious to improve their products and will pay substantial sums for ideas along those lines. Take the ordinary kitchen mixer, for example. It does many things, but it is safe to say that there are 101 undiscovered uses for this common home appliance. There are several manufacturers of such appliances and competition between them is keen. An attachment to increase the use of the mixer, which one of these manufacturers could exclusively feature, would be a valuable sales point. Similarly, it is possible to improve the most simple things. A good example is the ordinary tube of toothpaste. The tube was an improvement over the Cif top can, just as the Cif top can was an improvement over the can of soap which our fathers used. Yet the tube leaves much to be desired. It is unhandy, it is a nuisance, and it is unsanitary. What will the next improvement be? Will it be some simple dispenser, similar to the soap dispensers on Pullman cars, which can be built into a medicine cabinet or the washstand and always be ready for use? Somebody thought of wall dispensers for Italian Bomb, and it became one of the most important parts of the sales plan of that company. There are many other opportunities for improving the things that we use in the home, in the garden and office, if one is observing enough to see them and ingenious enough to figure out a way to add improvements. Of course, if you are experienced in a certain field, you have a particular advantage in being able to invent improvements that apply especially to that area of activity. There is nothing so perfect in this world that it cannot be improved, nothing so well done that it cannot be done better. The man who thinks that we have progressed so far that everything worthwhile has been thought of, will awake to find that nothing is static, but that the fertile brain of man is constantly finding a way to do everything better. Of course, there are opportunities, many of them, for inventing new things to fill a long-felt want. But the development and marketing of such inventions is at best uncertain. The story is told of the man who invented a knife and fork for a one-handed person, and in his enthusiasm had thousands manufactured. He learned too late that there were not enough one-handed people to use them and that it would cost so much to create a demand that he would have to charge more for his product than the average one-handed person would pay. Had he spent the same time and effort on improving something for which a known demand existed, the loss of both time and money might have been saved. Bert Pond's hobby ended up in a business. While Bert Pond was still a high school boy in Chicago, he became interested in model airplanes and joined the Illinois Model Aero Club. This is an airplane research group which, he believed, was far ahead of the rest of the world in the study of miniature flying craft of all kinds. While he attended Illinois U, he continued to make many midget planes and often paid his fraternity house bills with cash prizes he won at national exhibits. It was after Lindbergh's flight, however, when the country became aviation conscious, that he began to cash in on his knowledge of model airplanes. He resigned his job with the Minneapolis Honeywell Corporation and decided to build and help others build model airplanes. His first work was instructing classes in model airplane design at YMCA meetings, Boy Scout camps, and at various schools all over Indiana. He next wrote a series of articles on model airplanes for Popular Aviation, Popular Science Monthly, and other publications of this type. It wasn't long before the students in all these classes and the readers of his articles wanted materials to make their own models. So his next step was to make these materials which were so much in demand. In his Peru model airplane shop, Peru, Indiana, he manufactures not only a midget motor and a 614-ounce gasoline motor, but also the familiar rubber band twisters and numerous other parts and accessories for fans who build their own models. He supplies the featherweight wood called balsa, which is used for airplane models, Japanese silk tissue, special cements, and fresh rubber to power the planes. He also manufactures a low-price scale which weighs parts for the models down to 1/1000th of an ounce, and a miniature true-pitch propeller. Thousands of these propellers are turned out for other miniature aircraft companies. His shop also designs model kits and makes ready-built planes for other concerns. In the last year and a half, the model airplane shop has sold nearly 2 million planes in the 5 and 10 stores. Although he manages to keep busy the year round, there are rush periods during which the shop works night and day. There are 3 or 4 major national contests a year during which the orders just flock into the shop, and at Christmas time there is always an extra demand for models. The little motor manufactured by the Peru Model Airplane Shop works with air from a small light tank carried in the plane, and holds all the amateur competition records now standing. Another hobby which became a real vocation was that of H.E. Boucher. As a little boy, Mr. Boucher was forever making little boats which were the envy of his playmates. His parents had planned his entire education toward the end that he would someday become a naval architect. He did reach this goal, but his hobby persisted in taking all his spare time, and soon he found that he was making miniature ships for his friends. The demand increased, and presently his real work was being crowded out of his life by his hobby. It was then that he decided to stop fighting against his interest in this hobby, and he organized the H.E. Boucher Manufacturing Company. Today this company supplies miniature ships and ship parts to other hobbyists. It is one of the largest businesses of its kind today. Electrical toy sells out State Street. For perhaps a year or more, an editor on a Chicago business publication had been working on an electrical toy. At first glance, there seemed to be nothing remarkable about this toy. When you picked it up you thought it just another Jack-in-the-Box. When the little hook holding Jack-in-the-Box was lifted, however, there really was a surprise in store for you. Jack had 2 big electrical eyes which lit up fiery red when he popped out of the box. When the toy was ready for market, the editor, who had had considerable selling experience, decided to take it around to the store buyers himself. This was in September. By the middle of November he had sold every store on State Street, except the largest, whose toy buyer had been too busy to give the toy any real study. The small factory handling the production of the toy had made up the quantity the inventor thought would sell the first holiday season. But now demands for the toy came from outlying stores and also from the big store. However, he had made the profit he had set out to make that year, and the other buyers had to wait until the following Christmas for stock. The next year a much larger quantity of the toys was made up, and again he sold out. The mechanical or electrical toy field offers a rich market for the inventor who can capture a new idea in toys or take an old idea that has been on the market and put it in a new dress. Every holiday, fond mothers and fathers, to say nothing of grandparents, aunts and uncles, search the toy sections for something new and different for Jimmy or Sally Ann. Their wants are insatiable, and the inventor who can satisfy those wants will profit handsomely. Funeral flags and insignia. 2 years ago, Robert Hubble was out of work. Then one day he went to a funeral with a friend. Before the procession of cars started for the cemetery, the undertaker's assistant clamped a metal device on the running board of the car to hold a white flag with a purple cross. When the funeral was over and the clamp was removed, Robert Hubble's friend found the enamel scratched and the metal wrinkled where the clamp had been applied. Robert Hubble gave the matter a little thought, and within 2 hours in his workshop had invented a flag holder that slipped on over the bumpers. As flags get bedraggled in the rain and snow, he decided that a paper flag would be better, as it could be changed for every funeral at small expense. So, the new arrangement included a flag mast on which a paper flag could be clamped. The idea was a winner, and today, Mr. Hubble has a factory where he makes holders, masts, and white flags. He employs a dozen people and spends most of his own time out on the road selling to wholesalers. In addition, he has spent some time helping to lobby bills through a dozen states requiring the use of funeral flags in processions to prevent traffic from breaking into the line. Toy automobile puzzles onlookers. A little 50-cent toy Ford automobile, which is bringing its inventor plenty of profits, creates interest by its trick of automatically turning in another direction. Just as it reaches the edge of the table and you think it will run off, a hidden third wheel, at right angles to the front wheels, turns the automobile in another direction. Everyone wants one of these toys because of its trick of fooling the onlooker. Such toys offer a fertile field for inventors. Profits from whittling. In 1915, O. Dinsdale, O.D. to his friends, was an ambitious young man who had just been graduated from the California School of Fine Arts and the Berkeley School of Arts and Crafts. He was determined to become a painter equaling Michelangelo. But the war changed all that. After serving in France, Dinsdale returned to San Francisco restless and unsettled. He went up into the high Sierras and isolated himself in a crude cabin 20 miles upgrade. Here he aimlessly whittled out queer little animals and painted them. A hunter chancing on his retreat saw these animals and chuckled. "They've got personality," he said. "Send 'em down to the art shops. They'll sell." Dinsdale did, and his animals became a fad. He grew so busy painting pink elephants and purple lions that he had no time to bemoan shattered ambitions. Returning to town, he purchased a bandsaw and cut his creatures out of 3-ply pine, painting them in oils. Because his art education had included a thorough study of anatomy, his animals were proportionately right despite their whimsicalities and gaudy hues. Business expanded. In his garage he worked out nursery interiors and store displays, the old woman who lived in a shoe, for instance, for a juvenile shoe department. Dinsdale called his workshop the OD Studio and designed a black cat and blackbird trademark because his recently acquired wife considered black cats good luck. 15 years passed. Today the OD Studio is located downtown and equipped with the latest machinery. Animals have been left far behind in Dinsdale's march of progress. His unusual profession takes in decorative relief maps for vast projects, mechanical displays timed to light and sound, caricatures, and unusual animated exhibits. Strange assignments come to Dinsdale, one of these being his group of historical displays created for the Wells Fargo Bank Museum. True to scale and history, these dramatic tableaus would vie in interest with the valuable collection of relics bearing on California's frontier days. One, for example, has for its setting Sutter's Mill, where gold was first discovered, and shows in 5 scenes the evolution of mining implements from crude pan and shovel to effective hydraulic methods. The superbly painted scene, correct in every detail, is enlivened by quaint figures of Indians, miners, Spanish caballeros, and others, each true to type and costume. A clipper ship assignment was a hard nut to crack because these ships, which used to carry mail round the Horn, are out of existence. Dinsdale spent days talking to old waterfront characters and nothing has been omitted either from his clipper ship education or from the finished model. But his greatest interest lies in synchronizing sound with movement in mechanical displays. He built the first Christmas window of this type in San Francisco. 3 little pigs and the big bag wolf acted out while a phonograph played the song. Delighted crowds almost blocked traffic. But this is only a crude beginning to Dinsdale, who is working with a radio engineer on sound-controlled mechanics. Future animated displays will not be timed to phonograph records, he predicts, they will be moved by actual sound vibrations. A shoe painkiller builds a new business. Albert Sachs, who had been a retail shoe merchant in Salisbury, Maryland, for many years, long had an idea for another kind of business. He selected the tail end of the Depression as a favorable time to launch this other enterprise. His idea was for a device that would take the pain out of shoes. Mr. Sachs had been experimenting for 10 years with various methods of breaking in new shoes mechanically. He had always been interested in finding out how he could give his customers more foot comfort. It seemed a pity to him that many people had so much trouble with new shoes. Finally, he developed a system consisting of a set of jacks in which holes had been punched. These jacks were manipulated in the balky shoe until the area of pressure was over a hole. Here the leather was hammered until a depression was created, thus removing the cause of discomfiture to the wearer. These jacks were but the forerunner of Mr. Sachs' present system. Gradually he evolved a hydraulic press, based on the original principle that he used in Salisbury. A variety of brass forms are a part of the equipment. The machine presses a form into that part of the shoe that is causing the pain. This is done with such great force that the source of the trouble is permanently removed. Mr. Sachs decided that the best way to handle his invention was to lease the machine to operators who would run the business according to the inventor's specifications. Already there are 3 SHU-Ease comfort shops in New York City. Though these shops are conducted by lessees, Mr. Sachs gives the closest attention to their supervision. A charge of 25 cents is made for breaking in each of a pair of shoes. So popular is the service that it is claimed that the shop at 44th Street and Broadway is averaging 400 customers daily. It seems that everybody has shoes with pains in them. Early in 1935, a man from England dropped in to have his shoes adjusted. He returned a few months later, on another trip to this country, with an armful of shoes to be broken in by the hydraulic pain eliminator. Mr. Sachs' novel business is still a very small enterprise. But it is making money, and it holds a brilliant promise for the future. He is more than glad that he did not let the Depression scare him from putting his idea to work. Coleman made his $1,000 with polish. Say years ago, George Coleman came upon a formula for making metal polish. It sounded simple, so he decided to get the ingredients and mix up some. This first polish was in liquid form, and reasonably successful, but when he tried to sell it he discovered that it wasn't exactly what prospects required. Then he searched for a new formula. After a great deal of experimenting, he developed a formula of his own that was practical for use as an all-purpose metal and glassware polish, and has made hundreds of dollars as a result. While I found a widespread demand for a high-grade metal polish, said Coleman, I had difficulty selling enough to make worthwhile profit. I knew practically nothing about selling or advertising in the beginning, and it took a little while for me to learn. For instance, the containers I used had no labels, and my product had no name. I sold a gallon jug to a large Chicago hotel one day, and they asked me the name of the polish, explaining it was necessary to name the brand in their records. That stumped me. I haven't called it any special name, I said, but, use it, if it's good, you'll want more. The man laughed. I'll call it Use It, then. About 2 weeks later, I got a phone call at my home for 5 gallons of Use It. That's how I came to call the polish that name. When I went around, I told my prospective customers to use It, and sales began to increase. The polish did its work well, but there was a good deal of competition. However, as I picked up additional business steadily and was holding what I had, it wasn't long before I was making real money. I could have done better had I given the polish a trade name and made up a week or a 10-day supply at one time. But being cautious, I made up only as much polish daily as was needed to fill orders. Furthermore, I should have had some circulars printed, but I did not think it was necessary to give directions to the purchaser. I have since found I was wrong. To sell readily, a metal polish must have certain features, and these should be explained to the buyer. This explanation should be followed by instructions about applying the polish to glass and metal surfaces, and the effect demonstrated. Be sure that your formula does not contain poisonous or inflammable agents. While the danger from fire is not great, big users of polish will not have an inflammable or poisonous polish on the premises, as they don't want any more occupational hazards than are necessary. You can make up just as good non-poisonous and non-inflammable polish as you can a combustible and poisonous polish, and the cost is less. I would suggest to anyone starting in the polish manufacturing business that he make innumerable tests of the product. Find out whether it is simple or difficult to apply. Make it as simple as possible to apply to secure the best results. If your metal polish is safe to handle, easy to apply, and polishes all metal surfaces including brass, copper and chromium, perfectly, you will have a wide sale for it. But it will be in greater demand if it can be used to bring sparkling luster to mirrors, chinaware and porcelain. There are a number of formulas for making a good polish, meeting the above specifications. The demand by clubs, hotels, taverns, hospitals, restaurants, office buildings, factories, garages, steamship lines, railroads and for home use, is regular and steady. The polish may be made up at small expense, and attractively packaged. The cost including packaging is about 6 cents for an 8-ounce size, which retails for 25 cents. Sold in bulk to large users, such polish may be priced at from $1 to $3 a gallon. For one who likes to make up formulas, there is no better way to get the first 1,000 than through making and selling polish. Mrs. Royton's Button-Eyed Lambs. There lived in Oakland, California, a poor widow named Charlotte Royton, who, having 4 children to support, turned to the Syrah and was given a job as playground instructor, providing she could sufficiently entertain a lot of youngsters to keep them coming back. Just how could she fill these requirements? The children were from poor families, mixed races. They cared little for reading, they couldn't play in the court all the time, and sewing was out. Desperately the widow scoured the 5 and 10, mentally discarding jigsaw puzzles, dominoes, and dish towels for embroidering. Then she spied the little pig outlined on cambric to be cut out and stuffed. She pounced on him and took him to market, that is, she sat up nearly all night putting him together. The next morning, behold! Piggy had the niftiest black cutaway jacket edged in yellow, a curlicue tail, and a rakish black hat slanted over one pink ear. Mrs. Royton's children voted him a knockout, and when her charges saw him they seconded the motion and were eager to make one like him. The woman had no money, but she said, "Look, children, I don't know how we'll do it, but we're going to make those pigs." She purchased 4 yards of material and as much kapok as her thin purse would allow. She got 17 pigs out of the goods but ran out of kapok. So she had the children bring discarded stockings which were cut up and used to stuff the rest of them. She added other animals, purchasing some patterns and designing others, until there were 50 varieties. The children, more and more delighted, brought every available scrap from home. 2 Chinese girls brought 2 uncalled for sheets from their father's laundry, and after taking what material they needed gave the rest to the others. The old striped trousers of Antoinette's father yielded some amazing elephants, while Kitty McCarthy's green chinchilla reefer became woolly dogs with green bead eyes. Over 200 animals were made that summer by a class that had increased from 15 to 50 to the wonderment of the playground director. But here's where the fairy tale comes in. The widow sat up nights designing animals for the next day's session, and that's how the lamb came into existence. He was white muslin with black hoofs, and his flat, black button eyes made him the most innocent-looking lamb that ever followed Mary. Unknown to his originator, he was chosen for a national exhibit of handicraft held in Washington, D.C., where he blinked at the toy buyer of Saks & Company's Fifth Avenue store, New York. It was love at first sight. The buyer demanded that lamb and more like him. In due course, Mrs. Royden was flabbergasted to receive a letter from Saks asking for a dozen lambs and telling her to prepare for large orders. Daughter Eloise and the three boys fixed up a basement workshop for their mother, who glowingly declared, "I feel like a flower about to burst into bloom." She hopes soon to be able to stay home and look after her family while earning a living. And even if she doesn't sell 1,000,000 lambs and make $1 million, there is every indication that she will make 1,000. Chapter 6. Starting a roadside business. If you lack money enough to take your goods to your market, that is, open a store, advertise extensively, or hire a crew to sell house to house, you must bring your market to your door. That door may be just a roadside stand such as you see along the highways. Along these well-traveled routes, with their ever-increasing army of tourists, you have a great potential market. Jump in your car and run out on any highway. You won't go but a few miles before you run across at least one roadside stand. This stand may be the usual type, which sells farm products, eggs, poultry, fruits, vegetables, butter, honey, etc. It may be one of the thousands of stands scattered far and wide across the country's highways, which sells hamburgers, hot dogs, barbecue sandwiches, citrus and other fruit drinks, pop, potato chips, candied popcorn, donuts, or custard ice cream. Souvenir and postal card stands are so common it is hardly necessary to mention them. Then there are the historical souvenirs, which are sold around centers of historical interest. Whether one of these types of stands will make money for you depends upon the particular need in your locality, the buying habits of those who pass your way, and your ability to attract customers. Know your community well, for much of your business may come from those in your neighborhood as well as the tourists who pass through your town. Key your product to your section. The tourist who passes through the little towns of Vermont most likely will want maple syrup or maple sugar candy. You might convert the natives of Vermont to hot tamales, or make the tourist think he wants them, but you probably would lose a lot of money before you had done so. So cater to your section of the country. In the Pacific Coast region, Atlantic Coast, Gulf or Great Lakes sections, fish, fresh and smoked, are sold at roadside stands. In the East, particularly in New York, you will find a number of milk stations. The inhabitants of Texas are great consumers of ice cream, and any number of stands sell this hot weather confection. Mexican candy, known as pralines, is in demand around New Orleans and certain parts of Texas. In certain western and southwestern sections, unusual rocks and semi-precious stones are sold. Indian handicrafts, beadwork, silver and turquoise jewelry, and leather goods, are sold from stands in and near the Indian reservations. Throughout the Southwest, practically everything to wear, use, or to eat, is sold at roadside stands. Hand-wrought jewelry, pottery, beads, lace, carved ornaments, needlework, handmade baskets, hand-woven blankets, hot tamales, chili are a few of the many items you can buy along the roadside. In addition to these sectional types of stands, roadside stands are successful selling bird houses, garden ornaments, fishing bait, pets of all kinds, shells, taffy candy, honey and honey candy, pies, pecans, taffy apples, antiques, trellises and garden furniture of the rustic type, objects made of birch bark, toys carved from wood, flowers, plants and shrubs, goldfish, dolls and neckties. Next to getting the right product for your locality, there is nothing so important to the success of your enterprise as advertising. This may be in the form of signs placed in advantageous places on the routes to your stand, signs in the tourist camps, the railroad station. Or, a novel type of display stand may be sufficient to advertise your wares. One enterprising chap had a local builder make a huge hot dog for a stand and thus advertise to all the world his specialty. In Hollywood is a large iceberg which sells ice cream and cones to the youngsters. Out west there are also a number of huge lemons and oranges, which serve citrus fruit drinks and sandwiches. If you want something different, you might construct an ice cream freezer similar to one built in Los Angeles. This enormous freezer, which can be seen for miles, has a real handle on it that turns by means of a motor. In the East, a successful refreshment stand selling buttermilk, butter, ice cream, malted milk, sandwiches and similar products, is built in the form of 4 gigantic milk cans. An awning extends over the counter built around the can. A stand designed to resemble a huge basket of colorful vegetables would make a most novel advertisement for the sale of farm produce. While the country is dotted with many a coffee pot, one such refreshment stand is unusual in that it has an apartment above the store proper where the owner lives. A cider barrel or an old mill would tell the world that you sell cider, and an igloo would advertise cooling drinks and ice cream. Often these novel stands cost little more than the usual type to build, and the advertising value is incalculable. The display stand is not the only type of roadside business that flourishes, however. Many proprietors of golf driving ranges are making a good living catering to the inveterate golfer who is just out for a ride in his car. The pony ride is just as popular today with youngsters as it was years ago, and children will clamor for a ride whenever they see a cunning pony all saddled and waiting for a gallop. One man in Chicago made a good living for many years with his little string of ponies. When he retired and sold out his concession and ponies, he cleared several $1,000s. Since archery is becoming popular again, archery practice fields are springing up along the highways. Bicycle stands are common, as are also riding academies. A successful riding academy near Chicago was once an old farm. The farmhouse has been turned into an inn, and about 24 riding horses are stabled in the barns. Groups of young people come out on Saturdays and Sundays for a gallop and dinner. Many students on vacations come out during the week. Another novel roadside enterprise was developed by a young man just out of school who was finding it difficult to get a job. He bought several inexpensive cameras and rented them at the entrance to a large picnic grove. A deposit was required on each camera and a small fee was charged for rental. He added to his profits by selling rolls of film at his little stand. A small enterprise of this type is bound to succeed. The overhead is practically nothing, and it fills a need that no one else is bothering to fill, always an important factor in drawing customers. Candy bars, chewing gum, packaged nuts and other items can be added to increase profits. S.N. Dunn, the owner of this stand, attracts attention and trade by the moving handle on top of his novel place of business. There is nothing like motion to get the crowds. This unusual stand is located in Los Angeles. Good profits from a sale barn. In every farming community there is an opportunity to conduct a sale barn and earn regular profits the year round. If there aren't now too many in your community, it is worth trying. You don't even need a barn, although you can conduct the business better if you have a large lot and a building. You can, of course, rent one for the purpose. These sales are conducted in the following fashion. The operator of a sale barn advertises that on regular dates he will conduct a sale of any and all property brought to the barn. Usually the sales are held regularly, once a week, or twice a month. Saturday is frequently the day selected, although one of the most successful operators of sales conducts his sale at a farm near Washington Courthouse, Ohio, every Tuesday. Horses, mules, pigs, cattle, sheep, vegetables, seed, shrubbery, fruit and all kinds of farm equipment as well as furniture, stoves, and similar articles are in demand. In fact, almost anything you can name is sold regularly at these barns. Sales are for cash and the auction plan of selling is followed. At the S.F. Snyder Sale Barn, at Washington Courthouse, Ohio, each seller pays the operator of the barn a commission on all sales. The customary figure being 3% on livestock and 10% on miscellaneous equipment. One of the editors of this book attended a sale one afternoon at which a wagon load of grapefruit, a disc plow, cattle and several horses were sold. A 6-year-old gelding brought $215. The way to start is to select a good location. This may be a vacant lot, close into the business section, or if you think you need more room for the buyers and sellers to park their cars, select a larger lot on the outskirts of town. It is better, of course, if there are sheds, an empty barn, or some kind of shelter. When you have selected your location, visit the farmers of the community and explain your plan to them, telling them the date of the first sale. At first it may be necessary to persuade them to bring in things to sell. When talking with the farmers, ask them if they haven't a horse, mule, calf, cow, some extra fruit or canned goods, a plow, rake, cultivator, manure spreader or something of the kind they would like to sell. Nearly every farmer has some surplus of one kind or another. If your first sale is properly advertised and talked about, you will have a big crowd. A good auctioneer can always get something for almost anything offered. After the first sales results are known in the community, there will be little difficulty in getting things to sell and crowds to attend other sales. If there is a county or community fairground near your town and you can arrange to use the fair property for your sale, you will have an ideal place. But any location on good roads, easily accessible, will do for a start. Commissions are paid the sale operator at the time of the sale. Usual rules of bidding at auction sales are followed. Small advertisements in the local papers, and handbills or sale bills, as they are called, will be sufficient advertising, until the regular day and date of your sale becomes established and known in the community. A roadside tire repair business. It was a blown-out front tire, occurring while driving along Route US 20 from Chicago to Michigan City, that started James Morey in business. When the blowout happened, Morey did what many other motorists do, he replaced the flat with the spare, and threw the old tire in the weeds along the road. He decided to buy a used tire in Michigan City to carry as a spare on the way back. After calling upon several tire dealers in the Indiana city, Maury was forced to pay $5 for one that wasn't much better than the tire he threw away. Maury felt he was cheated. The idea persisted in his mind on his way back home, and he wondered how other motorists felt in similar situations. He thought that a roadside tire service station offering rebuilt tires at low prices would make a lot of money. By the time he parked his car in front of his house, Maury decided to go into the business himself. He rented a roadside stand adjoining a 3-pump gasoline station a short distance east of Gary and stocked it with 50 rebuilt tires secured from a Chicago jobber. He put up large signs 300 feet east and 300 feet west of his new tire station reading, "Tires $2.25 and up, 300 feet, and another large sign on the service station, facing the highway reading, "Home of Jimmy's Guaranteed Tires, $2.25 and up." Maury opened up for business. That was July 2nd. Over the 4th of July he sold out his entire stock and made a profit of $52. His initial investment was $145, including cost of the tires, rent, signs, and incidentals. The first month he operated this stand, Maury netted a profit of $203, after deducting the entire cost of his investment. Rebuilt tires such as Maury handles are standard brand tires which have been reconstructed by a special process at low cost. You can safely guarantee good mileage to customers who buy such tires from you. It is both a pleasant and a profitable business, requires little capital, and there is practically no chance for loss. A target green for iron practice. In Estes Park, Colorado, a man made a barrel of money last summer by renting a vacant lot on the main street of this bustling resort town and, on a sloping bank at the far end of the lot, arranging a giant putting green. The bullseye in the green was a hole about 4 times the size of a hole on a golf green. Circles on the target green were made with ridges of stone, and were graduated so that they became narrower as they approached the cup. The green was about 12 feet in diameter, and pitched facing the driving tee at an angle of about 15 degrees. The driving tee was about 50 feet away from the cup. The idea, of course, was to give those who thought they were good iron shots an opportunity to prove it by pitching 10 balls into the cup with a niblick. Each ball dropped into the cup counted 1, balls that missed the cup but dropped into the second ring counted 5, and those which landed in the next ring counted 10, and so on. Par for the hole was 20, and when a player scored par, he was entitled to shoot 10 balls free. The charge for shooting 10 balls was 10 cents. The names of those who shot the course under par were posted on a blackboard where they remained all day, and a daily prize was offered to the player getting the low score. Such a shooting green can be built at a very small cost, the only equipment needed being a dozen iron clubs, both mashies and niblicks, and about 50 repainted golf balls. While the idea is somewhat similar to the miniature golf fad of a few years back, it has one decided advantage: it gives the player an opportunity to perfect his approach shots, since he is playing with regulation clubs and under conditions identical to those he will experience in an actual game of golf on any club course. The owner of such a target green can figure on the average person shooting about 50 balls at a time. Selling bait at a roadside stand. Broke, lacking any income, and in poor health, Ella Gaston, a widow of 77, living in Joplin, Missouri, wondered what she could do to make some money. It occurred to her that a great number of fishermen passed her home along the highway leading into the Ozark fishing country. Where did all these men get their bait? There were plenty of worms in the mud flat of a creek nearby, perhaps she could sell them. It was worth a try anyhow. A friend built a roadside stand for her and hung a sign above it which told all passers-by that fishing bait could be purchased. Mrs. Gaston filled kettles, pails, boxes and buckets with soil and worms. The passers-by did stop and buy, and before long, she had to hire boys to dig worms for her to supply the demand. The boys are paid 10 cents a hundred for the wrigglers, and she sells them for 10 cents a dozen. Some days she has sold as high as 1,000 dozen. In 2 years, Mrs. Gaston figures she has sold over 1 million worms. Incidentally, in these 2 years, she has paid her own and her dead brother's debts. And because she has had an interesting and profitable bit of work to do, she has also regained her health. Making a stop and socket range pay. John Galway and Martin Sheffield, high school graduates who couldn't find a job, put their heads together, rented a vacant corner of 2 well-traveled highways on the outskirts of Chicago, and started a golf driving range that has paid them $600 in 5 months. It could easily be made to pay $1,000. The idea wasn't original, said Galway, but it was the best we could think of, and required practically no capital to start. We rented the corner for $15 for the entire summer season, that being the amount of the owner's taxes. The owner thought we were crazy, I guess, but told us to go ahead. We borrowed $50 from our parents, got some second-hand lumber with which we built a stand, and had some signs painted. Then we measured off distances and put up the signs at 50, 100, 150, 175, 200, and 250 feet from the tee off. We leveled the tee off ourselves, and did all our own labor, cutting the grass, and fixing up things. Our expenses for lumber and the signs came to $21. As we had a few golf clubs, we didn't need to buy any at the start. We bought the cheapest golf balls we could get with the rest of the $50, and were ready to do business. Our prices were 25 cents for driving 25 balls, 50 cents for driving 75 balls. We opened up on a cold Sunday morning in late April, and with high hopes sat in the stand. A few cars passed, but none stopped. Our first customer appeared about 1 o'clock Q that afternoon, and invested 50 cents in driving practice. The next customer pulled up while the first one was on the tee, and invested a quarter. 2 more appeared, before the first 2 had finished, and all left about the same time. However, we pocketed $2, and weren't feeling very bad. Still, we were rather anxious. In the days that followed there wasn't much business. We heard of another practice range about 5 miles off and I went over to see what they were doing, but they weren't doing much either. I talked to the owner. "Don't worry," he advised, "they come in bunches. When they see 1 or 2 people practicing on your course, a number will stop. The idea is to keep someone practicing as much as possible." Attracting customers. I agreed with that, thinking of our first day's experience. I felt the trick was to get the first motorist to stop and practice. When I got back, I talked the matter over with Martin, who said, "Why not decoy them, like hunters decoy ducks? Get someone to hang around and practice when we have no customers. Then when people are passing they might stop." We tried to get someone, but everyone we invited told us we'd have to pay them a salary. As we couldn't do that, we took turns swinging at the balls ourselves. First I would swing for an hour, and then Martin would have a go at it. Whether this brought the customers or not, I can't exactly say, but business began to pick up. Women, out for a drive afternoons during the week, drove up and practiced for a little while. Many came regularly every day. Meanwhile Martin and I were learning things about driving, and how to take a good stance and get that little extra snap in the drive that gives added power. Soon we were making fairly long drives, and began to attract attention from motorists. A golf professional, formerly with a small golf club, came to see us one day. He told us he was out of a job, and would like to give driving lessons. We arranged to let him use our place on a 50-50 split, and put up a sign. He charged $2 an hour, and helped Martin's form and mine, while he was around. When he got another job, 2 months ago, we left the sign up which offered instruction and collected the $2 hourly ourselves for teaching. Sunday is our big day. On a sunny Sunday afternoon we will take in as high as $30 from the practice range, and from the lessons. Weekdays run about $18 on an average. Of course, there's no business at all when it rains. A couple of hundred golf balls, a few clubs, a stand, and a good-sized lot along a highway is all the equipment needed for a driving course. Sidelines such as cold soft drinks, sandwiches, and ice cream, coffee, cigarettes and bar candies will add to the total profits. There are few more attractive ways for young and active men to get a start and accumulate capital during the open season. A roadside bookstore. An unusual business has been developed by J.C. Meredith, who operates a roadside stand near Traverse City, Michigan. This roadside stand sells neither hot dogs nor hamburgers, ice cream nor gasoline, but books. While rare in this country, this type of bookshop or stall is common in Europe, especially Paris. Mr. Meredith believes that the average person likes to browse in a bookshop and that not even a tourist can resist the impulse to stop and look over books and prints. A large sign over his stand states, "Why hurry? You'll enjoy visiting this roadside bookshop." Chapter 7. Storekeeping as a business. Wherever you live there are plenty of ordinary stores. In most towns and cities there are too many ordinary stores. Every week thousands of retail storekeepers go bankrupt, are closed out and shut up, with losses varying from $1,000 to $10,000 each. One Los Angeles wholesale house has one man who does nothing but attend to closing up stores, the owners of which can't pay their merchandise bills. Various reasons are given by the mercantile reporting agencies for the failure of so many retail stores: lack of capital, inexperience, credit losses, poor management, bad locations. These are but a few of the reasons given. Yet when you come right down to the final analysis, you will find that the chief reason is because the storekeeper did not render a needed or useful service to the community he served. That should be your first thought in determining whether or not you want to open a store. Can you render a useful service to the town, community or neighborhood to which you will look for your patronage? Will you offer the people of your community some service they need, or want, but are not now enjoying? Or will your store merely attempt to duplicate some service which is already being well performed? Will your store simply become another unit in an already overcrowded field? There are in the United States, as this is being written, 294,930 grocery stores, 12,433 millinery stores, 48,258 drug stores, 43,788 meat markets, 25,330 hardware stores, 12,110 variety stores, 24,676 dry goods stores, 21,481 furniture stores, 3,068 shoe stores, 9,196 haberdashers, 1,566 men's hat stores, 17,485 men's clothing stores. Between the time this is written and the time you will read it, thousands of these stores will have gone bankrupt, changed hands, merged, moved, or made some other change which indicates that the owners are making little, if any, profit. From this summary, it may seem to you as if storekeeping is a bad business, but it isn't. It is a fundamental necessity. Retail business suffers less, as a whole, than any other type of business during a period of depression. Of course, a depression clears out the unfit, the lazy, the slovenly and careless retailers. But the good ones carry on year in and year out, during good times and bad, with as great a degree of stability as is found in any other type of business. In spite of the dismal record of failures, you may want to open a store. What kind of store? The chains have made it increasingly difficult to make a profit out of a grocery, drug, cigar, hat or shoe store. There are plenty of these stores, anyway, so why pick a field in which you must compete with the most astute merchandisers in the country? Because of factors over which no individual has any control, discussion of the ordinary types of stores such as grocery, cigar, drug, hat and shoe, is being omitted. Of course, independent storekeepers enter these fields every week and some of them succeed. But to operate a drug store successfully you must be a pharmacist. A shoe store requires a heavy investment. There are so many incompetents in the grocery field and so much bitter competition from the chains, there isn't much incentive to enter it. Despite all the adverse factors that must be taken into consideration when contemplating storekeeping as a business, it is well to remember that some of America's greatest fortunes have been earned from storekeeping. There is always room for real ability. Thousands of new things to sell are being put on the market each year, each new item opening a new field for the storekeeper. Think of all the electrical appliances which were unheard of 10 or 20 years ago. Think of how much more is spent today than 10 years ago for sporting goods, sports clothing and toys. Think of all the things now bought ready-made or ready-prepared which only few short years back were made in the home. Millions of women never bake a cake today, but buy their cakes, cookies and bread from stores. Think of all the things women used to make for themselves that they now buy from stores. There was a time when a woman bought a purse and used it until it was worn out. Now she buys a purse, a hat, gloves, stockings, and shoes to match every dress. The matched accessories or ensemble idea has added millions of dollars to retail sales in recent years. It is easy to see there is no limit to the variety of services a retailer can render. A far larger share of our national income is spent today in retail stores than in the days when our own hands made most of what we eat, use and wear. This is one of the reasons storekeeping is growing and will continue to grow and expand. Deciding what kind of store to open. Having eliminated fields which are overcrowded and fields where special experience or training is a necessity, it is evident that you may not want to tackle any of the usual types of stores. But even with all these eliminations, there still remains a vast field for the owner of a specialty store. What is meant by the term specialty store? In the usual sense of the word, it means the little shops that dot every main street, the shops that specialize in lingerie, corsets, costume jewelry, $1.88 hats for women, novelty shops, etc. But there are hundreds of other specialty shops which have not yet penetrated all parts of the country. Some of these are tropical fish shops, pet shops, exclusive hosiery shops, little shops that sell nothing but nuts and nut candies, bridge shops that specialize in bridge supplies and prizes, necktie shops, fountain pen shops, vacuum cleaner stores, washing machine, new and used, shops, portable typewriter shops, drugless drug stores, gift shops, butter and egg stores, milk depots, stamp shops or exchanges, potato chip stores, popcorn candy stores, greeting card and novelty shops and a score of other unusual stores. Your previous experience, your likes and dislikes, your personal preferences, all should be taken into consideration when thinking of opening a specialty shop. Then there is the matter of finances. How much can you invest? How big a business do you want? Do you want to go into business on a fairly pretentious scale, selling on credit, delivering and handling a large stock? Or do you prefer a small shop which you can run with the aid of one assistant, with no delivery or credit expense? Take all of these factors into careful consideration before you decide what kind of store to open. There is another factor too. What kind of people do you know? Do you have a following and acquaintance among factory workers? Then pick a store with merchandise they can buy. Or do you know the community's wealthiest and most stylish folks? If this is true, start a store catering to them. Make use of every advantage you possess. Do you know automobile owners, or have you served them in some capacity in the past? Then perhaps you will want to consider a tire store. Whatever your past experience may have been, you should try to capitalize on it when you open your store. There is another way to determine what kind of store to open. Find out what the people of your community must go out of town to buy. Suppose you were thinking of starting a fishing tackle store. Contact a number of fishermen and get them to tell you where they buy tackle. Do they have to go to some out-of-town store, or buy by mail? Would they patronize you if you handled a complete line? What items do they have the most difficulty in finding in local stores? These are some of the questions to ask around your community before you start a store. In this book you will find specific and definite suggestions, based on the actual experience of others in starting specialty stores. From these suggestions, and a careful survey of the needs of your community, there is no reason why, if you really want to, you can't start a successful store. Choosing the best location. There are two general types of store locations, popularly called high-rent locations and low-rent locations. Of course, the high-rent locations are the hot spots on the busiest downtown streets. Even a small store in such a location may rent for thousands of dollars a year. Without adequate capital, such locations are almost out of the reach of the average beginner in storekeeping. But for the sale of certain drop-in items, these locations are almost essential. People will not walk upstairs, around the block, or even across the street to buy convenience items such as chewing gum, cigars, cigarettes, popular drug items, soft drinks and similar merchandise. For stores specializing in this type of merchandise, location is the most important thing. In selecting your location, try to determine how much your type of store is actually dependent on location. Pick a location that is in a growing section of town. Beware of a section that is being overrun by manufacturing, garages, cheap rooming houses, or gives other indications that the neighborhood is going to cede. Different types of stores require different locations. Be sure you know just what type of people you intend to cater to, and that the location you select is in a neighborhood frequented by such people. In every business section there is always one side of the street that is most popular. Locate your store on this side of the street. Most of the busiest locations are now cluttered up with cheap chain stores, featuring price merchandise. A high-grade store sandwiched in between a $1.88 hat store and a 5 and dime store might fail, in spite of the heavy traffic passing it. Don't be too sure that your store will attract people a block or so out of their habitual path. People have gone broke trying to change buying habits. Don't hamper your store by selecting a location where people have to walk up steps, or take a few steps down to a floor level, even a foot or so below the sidewalk level. Obtain a location with floor exactly level with the sidewalk. Beware of a store with a front that curves inward. People don't notice such a front. Most young businessmen make the mistake of leasing a store that is really too big. Figuring out how much you think you want, then cutting the space in half, isn't a bad rule to follow when selecting a location. Remember that a large store requires more heat and light, more fixtures, and a bigger stock. Just because a landlord wants to sell you the entire store is no sign he will not divide the store and rent you half or two-thirds of it. It may even be possible to lease space from a non-competing store. Jewelers occasionally lease a space in one end of a drug store. Sometimes you will see a jewelry store in one section of a furniture store. Many expenses can be reduced or eliminated if you can start your store as part of another store which is already well established. In hundreds of department stores throughout the country there are independent operators who own certain departments, but operate them as a part of the big store. Lobbies of office buildings, hotel lobbies, or even a small space in what would be one entrance to a large store are frequently used for small stores. Remember that every cent you save on rent and other expenses will enable you to hold out successfully just that much longer. What makes a store successful? Sidney Carter, of the Merchant Service Department of Rice Sticks, the big St. Louis wholesale house, has made a special study for many years of the factors that make a store successful. He puts it this way: I know a merchant who isn't very friendly, whose store isn't very neat, but who does a big business because he has merchandise in good quantities. I know another merchant whose store is neat, whose stocks are good, but who does a comparatively poor business, because he isn't friendly with people. I know another merchant who has a badly lighted store, and no fixtures to brag about, but who does a big business because he is a good salesman and knows how to teach his clerks to sell. So you see, there are always many factors in determining what makes a store successful. The National Cash Register Company, whose officials know as much as almost any group of men on earth about operating stores, reports in its excellent book, better retailing, that the things which customers like are a good assortment of well-arranged stock, prices right and in plain sight, quick, courteous, accurate service, exchange and money back without question, truthfulness about merchandise, the same price to everybody, an attractive, convenient, well-lighted, comfortable store, chairs for rest when selecting goods that take time to choose, careful attention to children and servants, accurate filling of telephone orders. There has been an enormous improvement in stores in the past few years. Customers are accustomed to better salespeople, more careful attention, an increasing amount of service, better lighting, and far more courtesy than we once expected. They simply will not tolerate a slipshod, careless, unkept store anymore. A store that isn't neat has no more chance than a frowsy debutante. People will no longer argue about returned goods. No matter how wrong the customer may be, he is right in his own mind and expects to be treated accordingly. A customer may have no right to expect to return a hat after she was worn it, but no merchant ever got rich standing up for his rights. Overbuying is another cause for failure. An old-time merchant once told me this as his secret of making a profit: remember, you can always buy more. In buying your opening stock, keep in mind that the manufacturers are scarcely going to stop making merchandise that is in demand. In opening your store, don't tie up more than half of your capital in stock. Save some of it for unexpected expenses, for tiding you over a dull season, or for buying stock to replace slow-selling merchandise which is mistakenly purchased when opening. Keep merchandise moving. Successful merchants aren't afraid to sacrifice merchandise that is not moving. After you have kept merchandise more than a few weeks, it has begun to eat its head off. It should be sacrificed at any reasonable price just to get your money out of it, so you can put money into something that will turn and make profits. No matter how much merchandise costs, it is worth only what you can get for it. Successful merchants have always gone slowly in committing themselves for heavy time payments on costly equipment. Don't make the same mistake one merchant did who had an $800 stock of variety goods and a $750 cash register. While good equipment is essential, don't tie yourself up for payments on fixtures, scales, registers and signs. Even if you do a good business, monthly installments on equipment will take all the ready cash you can obtain. Last, but not least, move heaven and earth to satisfy your customers, and keep them coming back. If a customer buys only once, telephone him, see him, write him a letter, if you even suspect that he is buying elsewhere. Find out why he didn't repeat. Make any errors right. Make him understand that you are striving to please him. It is by such tactics that successful storekeepers are made. Starting a stamp shop. The intense interest which has developed in stamp collecting led Philip Carpenter, retired from the Postal Service at the age of 65, to sell the stamps he had collected to philatelists in Portland, Oregon, where he lives. Although he had a limited supply of stamps at the start, he rented a portion of a store window, placed most of his stock on display, and waited for buyers to come along. My time was worth practically nothing, he explained, so there was little to be lost by displaying the stamps and talking to possible buyers. I had quite a number of stamps which I had bought from the post office during the 30 years I carried mail. Other stamps had been given to me by relatives and friends who had heard that I was collecting stamps. Many of these were duplicate commemoration stamps, such as the Century of Progress and Harding. A number were foreign and air mail. All in all, they made a good display. However, as I had little merchandising sense, I made only $15 the first week, which was barely enough to cover expenses. After a few weeks, I got acquainted with other dealers. We met once a week in a little restaurant and talked business. From then on, I began to get the right slant on the stamp business. They explained that the prices I was charging for some issues were too low, other prices were too high. They also pointed out that I needed some new stock, so I got in touch with several wholesalers. I learned values quickly after that, and shortly I saw the real possibilities of this business. I studied various stamp issues and found that I could buy from private collectors at more advantageous prices than I could from the wholesalers. One day a chap came in with a marvelous collection. "I'm broke," he said, "I'll sell you this entire stock for $100. He told me that these stamps had originally cost him almost $2,000. The other collectors, because of the depression and because he insisted on selling them the whole lot intact, had turned him down. When I glanced over the stamps, I discovered several that were rare, and I saw that I could easily make a good profit. So I took the lot. The next day, I called upon a customer who had been seeking some Danish West Indies, and sold him 3 blocks of 4 each at a good profit. Before that week was over, I had sold the entire collection to history professors, school teachers, and stamp collectors for $796. For some time I thought about this sale, and I came to the conclusion that if one person had a collection to sell, there probably were others. I ran a small advertisement in the newspaper offering to buy all or part of the stamp collections of the people in Portland. I secured several good collections in this way, and presently I had a good sized stock at a cost of only $460. I discontinued the advertisement and began to concentrate on selling this stock. Before long I had sold all but a few of the stamps at a profit of $1,400. Carpenter contacts the universities, schools, and even the museum in Portland. School teachers, especially those teaching high school classes, are interested in stamps, since they are able to teach more colorfully such subjects as history and geography through their use. Foreign cancelled stamps, especially those from France, India, England, Italy, Germany, Sweden, British South Africa, Honduras, China, and Japan, are, regardless of issue, in constant demand by school teachers. They bring as high as 300 to 400% profit to the stamp collector. Catalogs listing the prices at which stamps should be sold are available from wholesalers, and some of the stamp listings give both wholesale and retail prices. A stamp shop may be started either by advertising in the newspapers for stamps, as Carpenter did, or by getting in touch with one of the many wholesale stamp companies. These companies will generally submit a large assortment of stamps on an approval basis, allowing the dealer a discount of 25 to 50%. Hence he can start his shop with very little capital. An excellent location for this type of business is in a circulating library near a school. This comfy corner in Marshall Field store typifies the trend in shopkeeping, making buying a pleasure as well as a duty. It is one thing which an independent business, built around personal service, can do to meet the price competition of big chains. Making a grocery store pay. It is a notorious fact that most people who open up a grocery store fail. The mortality rate is higher than in almost any other business. There are a number of reasons why this is true. Sometimes the man who opens up the store lacks industry. He is just plain lazy. He may have picked a poor location. Or he may have shown poor judgment in stocking his store. But the principal reason for the high percentage of failures is that the average man who opens a grocery store overlooks the importance of sales ability and sales knowledge. Competition in the grocery business is so keen today that old methods of storekeeping won't do. In order to succeed, you have to know why people buy, and how to make them buy. To some extent, this knowledge comes natural to observant people. However, there are certain definite fundamentals about salesmanship which need to be understood to be successful in the retail business. Fortunately for James Brandt, he realized this when he began to think about opening a grocery store in Los Angeles. He could not very well give up 2 or 3 years to acquire the needed selling experience, but he learned from a friend that there were schools which taught the principles of salesmanship by mail. That, he thought, would make it easy since he could open his store and study while he earned. One section of this course, he said, was devoted to retail merchandising and, among other things, explained various methods of building retail sales. This section, of course, was intended for the wholesaler's salesman making calls upon retailers, and was designed to show him how to help the retailer move the goods from his shelves. Being a retailer, I read this section carefully and found a number of excellent suggestions which I later put into practice in my grocery business. From the day I opened the store, I realized the benefits of my salesmanship course. Not only did it teach me how to address a customer, but it taught me how to suggest things so as to build up the unit of sale. By applying the right merchandising principles, I found I could increase a sale by as much as $1. You see, there's a difference in the way an additional item is suggested to a customer. Suggest it one way, and the customer resents it. Suggest it another, and the customer is interested. This art of suggestion helped me get a good start. By applying this principle and others, I soon built up a successful trade here in Los Angeles. Jimmy Brandt's course in salesmanship cost him $84, which he paid in small monthly payments. But it was worth considerably more than that to him. While most people may not be interested in a course in salesmanship, it is well to think of the many advantages of training if you want to succeed in business. Undoubtedly, such training does open new fields, and keeps you from making mistakes that often are costly and always avoidable. No better way of preparing yourself for a successful career in business may be found, than is furnished by specialized training in business practice and business fundamentals. It certainly shortens the way to that first 1,000. The ins and outs of running a gift shop. Mrs. Barkley had $500. She wanted to start a business of her own. There were already 2 struggling gift shops in the town, but they carried mediocre merchandise. Any gift the least out of the ordinary had to be purchased from the department stores in the nearby city. Practically everyone played bridge the year round in this town, and there was an active social life, plenty of showers for brides-to-be, baby showers, announcement parties, children's birthday parties, etc. Here was a market for gift merchandise made to order. What this town needs is a good gift shop, and I am going to see that it has one, Mrs. Barkley remarked to an old friend one day. The first step was to find the proper location. A vacant store near enough the business center to attract trade and not too near that the rent would be out of line, proved to be an ideal location. The interior was painted a pale yellow, and the inexpensive shelves and display tables made by a local carpenter were painted the same color. Sheer yellow curtains were hung at the 2 display windows and drawn to the sides in order to permit the passerby a view of the interior. This one color scheme made an effective background for the display of merchandise, which naturally came in every color of the rainbow. One wall of shelves held china, pottery and glassware. The wall across from it held brass, pewter, woodenware and silver gifts. The display shelves on the back wall were low, and above them were hung a lovely piece of chintz and a colonial mirror. These low shelves held toys suitable for children from infancy up to the age of 10 or so. The space above the shelves on the other 2 walls was large enough to permit the hanging of several pictures, etchings, prints, reproductions of oils and watercolors. 2 comfortable chairs with end tables at their sides, 3 display tables and the wrapping counter took up the remainder of the space but left sufficient room for a small crowd to get about. One of the tables was sufficiently long to display a number of items suitable for bridge prizes from $1 to $3, the prices usually paid in this community for bridge prizes. A smaller table displayed playing cards, bridge tallies, pencils, table covers, ashtrays, and a few books on systems of playing bridge. The third table held novelties which were the fad at the moment and for which there would be a certain demand for a short time. The display case, which was the bottom of the wrapping counter, held merchandise which is easily soiled, such as silk lampshades, silk and velvet cushions, dainty linens and baby gifts such as bonnets, jackets, dresses, shoes, carriage robes, and pillows. A cabinet at one end of the counter contained gift cards, fancy paper for wrapping gifts, ribbon and colored string, little candles for birthday cakes, larger candles in various colors for luncheon and dinner tables, paper napkins and tablecloths, and place cards. The windows were kept shining and bright and the displays changed daily. Only a few things were placed in each window each day, perhaps a bowl and candlesticks, a picture and a piece of beautiful brocade, or a small lamp and an unusual cigarette box open to show the cigarettes within. Each piece displayed was beautiful, distinctive, colorful, or perhaps all 3. Building up a clientele. A customer list maintained on cards gives the name of the customer, address, and telephone number and, on the back, a list of the things purchased with the date of purchase. A check of these cards from month to month brings up the names that are not buying, and a simple announcement describing new merchandise received is mailed to such names. The telephone is also used to tell customers about new items. Subscriptions to gift magazines keep Mrs. Barkley in touch with new merchandise, and a visit to the more important gift shops and the department store gift departments in the large city nearby also gives her new ideas on displays and gift items. Then there is, of course, the semi-annual exhibit of giftwares in the city, which she attends regularly. Magazines such as House Beautiful, Harper's Bazaar, Vogue are looked over carefully for suggestions which may be incorporated in displays or window arrangements. When talking to customers, she makes a point of mentioning such and such an item or display as being similar to that shown in the current issue of House Beautiful or Vogue, or other magazine from which it happens to have been culled. This plan always succeeds in creating interest in a new display and at the same time helps to sell the customer. After the first few weeks, people began to take notice of this shop. They found that it wasn't just a place where you might find what you wanted, it was a shop that would have just what you wanted. This ability to create confidence in her selection of merchandise began to build up a nice clientele almost immediately. By the end of the first year, Mrs. Barkley had to hire an assistant and to add 2 new sections to her shop, a greeting card section and a knitting corner. The assistant was an expert with the knitting needles, and being also a young woman with ideas and a pleasing personality, she soon helped Mrs. Barkley build up a nice yarn business in the knitting corner. It is possible, of course, to start a gift shop with less money than Mrs. Barkley invested. If your home is one of the old-fashioned, comfortable residences built in the 90s, part of the space can be used for your shop. The room selected should be easily accessible to the passerby and have suitable windows for display. The walls and woodwork should be painted a harmonious color if they are not appropriate in their present condition for the display of merchandise. If the room has a fireplace, so much the better. While some shelving will be necessary for the display of merchandise, particularly as the amount of stock is increased, many of the gifts can be displayed as part of the furnishings of the room. The mantel offers a suggestion for the display of vases, china figurines, pictures, mirrors, etc., and the display should be changed daily in order to make the most of this central feature. 1 or 2 gate-leg tables, a Pembroke table, a tilt top, and a coffee table will aid in the display of gifts, and a chest of drawers will hold much of the more fragile merchandise. A study of the types of interiors featured in the current magazines devoted to interior decoration will help you in the arrangement of this type of room. An announcement in the local paper and printed announcements, suggesting appropriate gifts for all occasions, mailed to a selected list of names, will let people know that you have a shop and that it is open for business. Keep a list of your customers and the lookers as well, and use the telephone to keep in touch with them when new merchandise arrives. Don't expect this type of business to grow overnight, rather a slow, steady rate of growth and the development of a dependable clientele should be your aim. How to become a corseteer. If there is a hospital in your town, here is an idea that may be worth $1,000 to you. A woman who had been a corseteer decided to open a shop with her savings. She selected a location in a busy outlying part of the city in which she lived. 2 blocks away, the neighborhood was zoned for light factories and, of course, many girls were employed in the offices of these factories. There were also a number of young women employed in the offices and stores in the immediate neighborhood. But most important of all, just 2 blocks from her store was a large hospital. Having had considerable experience in fitting surgical corsets, she had selected this location in order to build up a business catering to postoperative cases in need of abdominal support, and in supplying the proper type of corset for invalids and others in need of special corrective garments. She arranged to carry the line of the largest manufacturer of popular types of corsets, brassieres and girdles. This company was also noted for its surgical supports and offered excellent cooperation to corseteers handling this sort of garment. Keeping in mind her market, she stocked her shop with girdles for the younger women who worked in the offices in the neighborhood, with corsets for the heavy matronly figures among the housewives in the residential section, with collar and cuff sets, belts, gloves, handkerchiefs, a good grade of hosiery, brassieres and other lingerie, boutonnieres, and notions such as darning cotton, tape, thread, hairpins, powder puffs, etc. Later, when she began to know her customers' tastes better, she would purchase 10 to 15 dresses in the moderately priced line which she knew would be suitable for certain customers, and telephone them that the dresses were in stock. Frequently, all were sold in a day or two as the styles and prices were right. Her first step in building up a business in corrective garments was to call on the doctors in the neighborhood and explain that she was a trained corseteer and specialized in surgical supports. She also left cards with the hospital office. Through the nurses who purchased hosiery and other items, she secured further advertising. A card record of every customer was kept on file giving the name, address, type of garment purchased, date purchased, and size. From time to time postcards were sent to these names announcing something special. A separate record was kept of the patients who had been fitted with surgical supports, and these names were followed up by special calls in order to determine definitely whether or not the garment sold had been satisfactory and, incidentally, whether a new one or a different type of garment was now required. The store had only one display window, but she made the most of it by keeping it spotlessly clean, by changing the displays frequently, and by displaying the latest fashions in lingerie or the most attractive seasonal items. Whenever she had purchased a few dresses, she would place one in the window with a card stating that a new stock of dresses had just arrived. Within the store, the collars and cuffs, the handkerchiefs and silken lingerie were attractively arranged in display cases, brassieres were displayed on models in the corset section, and if dresses were in stock they were arranged on a long rack at the back of the shop. The surgical support section was located in a room at the back of the shop which was divided to include a fitting room and space for altering garments. For 10 years this little shop flourished, and during good times and bad she made money. What competition did spring up quickly died down because she never made any attempt to compete on a price basis, and very few merchants could match her ability to serve her customers. The corset manufacturer whose line she carried saw that she had about exhausted her market and for some time had been urging her to move to a neighborhood with greater possibilities. Finally she decided to make the change and rented the shop the manufacturer's agent had selected. 2 display windows enabled her to attract more passers-by, and a larger stock with greater variety helped to build up more business than she could have handled in the old shop. 2 hospitals in this neighborhood kept her busy with special fittings, and she still had many customers through the doctors at the hospital in the old neighborhood. As she located only about 2 miles away from the neighborhood where her other shop was established, many of those whose names were on her customer list still patronized her shop. Even though you may not have the advantage of the special training which this woman had, that need not prevent you from starting a business of this sort. Most of the corset manufacturers conduct courses which you can attend to learn the business. You do not have to open a store at first, but can start by soliciting orders from friends and others until you get a trade built up. Very little capital is required if you begin in that way, and then after you have earned a few $100s you can invest in a stock and open up a store. If you like people, enjoy selling, and buy cautiously, you should soon be able to build up a business which will net you a good income, well over $1,000 a year. Start a second-hand magazine shop. We started Max Magazine Shop with a pile of magazines, a few dollars, an idea and a location, said Mrs. McIntyre, commenting upon the beginning of the business in which she and her husband made their first $1,000. We had to live somewhere, so we rented cheap store space, moved in, washed the windows and partitioned off living quarters in the rear. Then we bought a pile of second-hand magazines from a storage warehouse which was selling out the stored possessions of people who had not paid their storage rental. After starting this type of store, the next move of the MCL and Tires was to decide on where they were going with it. While the sale of used magazines might tide them over the depression, to make a big business of it and to build for permanence and the future required a definite objective. They considered ways and means, and finally they decided just to be different. They would carry a file of back numbers as far back as they could, build up this file as a reference file, and at the same time build up a wholesale business in used magazines. Of course, they didn't accomplish this aim overnight. Like so many beginners, they made many mistakes and, too, they had a great deal to learn. Watching out for profits. The most important thing, I discovered, continued Mrs. McIntyre, is that everything you sell must be sold at a profit. As long as you make a little profit on every sale, you can't lose anything. In acquiring the used magazines, we accidentally got hold of books, sheet music, and unframed pictures and sketches. We did not want these things, but they were often forced upon us. When we had a number of old books and pictures, we sorted them and placed price tags on them. People entering the store for magazines often bought a book or two, or inquired about books. We found also that the old sheet music had a cash value. So we decided, while building a file of back numbers of magazines for reference, to build a back number file of songs. This requires patience and everlasting work, but it is worth the effort. Today we are the only people in the Middle West who can be depended upon to deliver back numbers of many magazines, and we receive orders from bookstores, libraries and collectors for back issues, as well as complete files of magazines. The price ranges from a nickel to $2.50 for each magazine. We obtain the magazines from the janitors of apartment buildings, hotels, and rooming houses. We also make frequent trips to the furniture storage companies and pick up magazines at little cost, usually about a cent a copy. Some magazines may run a little higher, but the most we ever figure on paying for a magazine is 25 cents. We aim to have as complete a file on each magazine as it is possible to get. We also try to carry as many different magazines as our storage space permits and we are able to secure. If a call comes in for a certain magazine title or a certain issue, we make every effort to secure it for the customer, trying the many sources of supply we have uncovered. For this service a slight extra charge is made, which the customer is usually willing to pay if he is really anxious to secure the magazine. Learning to estimate values. Books, too, have various prices. As Webster's Collegiate Dictionary will bring us as high as $4, we can pay up to $2.50 for it. However, school books, unless they are in current use, are worth absolutely nothing, regardless of how good their condition may be. Religious writings seldom are worth a great deal. But it's difficult to generalize, for there are certain 5th grade readers which, though several pages are torn out, are worth $5 each, and some small books that you wouldn't think worth a cent, will bring big prices. A book's value is generally determined by the number of copies that are still in existence. A book by a well-known author, for example, which had a small original printing and has been out of print for a long time, will be worth many times its original value. On the other hand, standard works, of which many editions have been printed, won't sell for 10 cents. It took a little time to discover which books were which. I've sold books for a nickel that I later discovered were worth several dollars, and magazines for 10 cents that had a current value of $2. But each time I made a mistake of this kind, I remembered it. In the beginning, it's best to stick to the medium-priced magazines and books, until you learn more about the valuable ones. Shortly after opening the magazine shop, Mr. McIntyre paid $10 for a used Ford of ancient vintage which actually ran. Each morning he drove around Chicago and stopped at his various sources of supply. In the evening he returned to the shop with several hundred old magazines, books, pictures and songs, which had been discarded by tenants and piled in basements or left in storage and forgotten. In less than 2 months, it was found necessary to expand the size of the shop, so more space was rented to care for extra business. Later, this store embraced frontage reaching half a block along State Street. The business increased so rapidly that today, in addition to this North State Street shop, the McIntyres operate a beautiful store in the heart of Chicago's Loop. It took less than 2 years for them to build up this amazingly profitable business in old magazines and books. Many people might overlook the possibilities of a store of this nature. Few, however, are unaware of the widespread interest in magazines, or that a periodical several years old still retains reader interest. It is an easy business to start and offers unlimited opportunities. As Mrs. McIntyre says, one needs only a pile of old magazines, a spot, and enough beans and coffee to live on for a few days. Butter and egg stores can be easily started. Because Harvey Keller didn't want to give up his girlfriend, he moved to the big city to be near her, and there established a business selling eggs and chickens fresh from his father's farm, which netted him a profit of over $600 in less than 2 months. Keller first brought 2 cases of eggs into Chicago. He called from door to door, selling butter and eggs at a fraction under store prices and guaranteed them to be right from the farm. When these 2 cases of eggs were sold, Keller drove back to his father's farm and returned with 7 cases. His profit on each case was $4. Noticing that aside from groceries and markets, there was no place where one could secure eggs, and considering the friendly way in which the public received him, Harvey decided to open what he calls a hennery. He rented a small store on a side street a few doors from a streetcar line for $15 a month, and stocked this with eggs and several crates of live chickens. I didn't have opening a store in mind at first. I saw there was money bringing in cases of fresh eggs, but it was apparent that I was wasting a lot of time driving to the farm and back. I arranged to bring in a truckload of eggs and needed a place to stock them. I had my father send the chickens, hoping to find a market for them. People passing the store stopped and watched me stack the crates of eggs in the store. Some came inside and asked if I were opening an egg store. I replied that I just brought the eggs from the farm, and would sell them at regular store prices. In a little while, I had sold 15 dozen, and was convinced a store selling eggs and chickens exclusively would pay in that locality. I locked up and made my rounds of the neighborhood, and when I asked for orders, told my customers about the line. I sold a case of eggs and 3 chickens before noon, and returning to the store, fixed the door so it would remain open. That afternoon, I put in a counter. But business didn't rush in as I expected. Advertising brings in customers. The corner druggist told me, when I dropped into his store for cigarettes, that if he were in my place he would have some circulars printed, explaining that I had opened the store and offered chickens and selected fresh eggs brought in by truck from my father's farm, and to distribute these circulars wherever I went. This sounded like a good idea. Don't put these in the mailboxes, the printer warned me when I picked up the circulars. Hand one to the woman when she opens the door. Most women I called upon didn't buy from me, for only 1 in a dozen needed eggs at the moment I knocked on the door. But I left a circular at each home I called upon. Within a few days, I was doing a brisk business. Some people came out of curiosity, but everyone bought something. I also got considerable business by paying high school boys a small commission to get orders from their friends. Keller supplies country fresh eggs from this store to people from many blocks around. His total investment in the store in his first stock was less than $75. His sales now average 4 cases of eggs daily, and daily earnings from the sale of both eggs and chickens run about $19. In order to handle deliveries on orders phoned in, Keller found it necessary to hire a clerk. He continues to go out from house to house picking up orders, which he declares is the backbone of his business. A somewhat similar idea has been developed by a family in Glencoe, Illinois, who owned a big farm near Lake Geneva. In order to market the farm's products and compete with local stores in North Shore towns, they rented and fixed up 2 barns at locations near the main highways on the edge of town. The stores were advertised as the barn and catered especially to automobile trade. The barn, as in the case of Harvey Keller's hennery, depended upon established trade, the telephone being used to keep in touch with customers. The pleasing thing about a business of this sort is the quick turnover. There is no stock to go dead on your shelves. Even though you may not own a farm, or have any relative who can supply you with fresh farm products, you can locate some farmer who will be glad to arrange with you to market his butter, eggs and chickens in this way. By specializing on those 3 products, possibly adding ducks and turkeys in season, you can build up a tidy business in short order. People are willing to pay well for really fresh eggs and farm butter. The Hosiery Bar. The Hosiery Bar is an unusual way of making limited capital usable in starting one's own business. Miss Hannah Hilb, owner-manager of the Hosiery Bar, Denver, found that she could take advantage of a part frontage in the center of Denver's most popular downtown section. A lease was secured on an 8-foot wide store at a nominal figure. A few alterations changed the front to a baby store with 2 miniature windows and a 3.5-foot door. The store, extending back to a 30-foot depth, was carpeted with a remnant by. Fixtures included the regulation side cabinets, 2 display tables, and a specially made bar. The side cabinets and the tables were cut down approximately 12 inches in their widths, finished in glistening ebony paint, and trimmed in chromium. The bar, the main attraction in the place, was constructed on modern lines, being a single piece of compo board covered with ebony linoleum and protected and supported on each side with heavy chromium strips. Fashioned in the form of an elongated J, the curve or tail was placed to the front of the store so that it curved under, forming one end support. The arm extended back to serve as a 12-foot service counter. The rear support was fashioned doubly strong to accommodate the added weight of a cash register. All fixtures were purposely narrowed in their width to create the illusion of more space in the shop. These fixtures, which were purchased second-hand, ran around $90, exclusive of the bar. The latter ran about $60, remodeling of interior $200, extras about $50. The original stock was approximately $500. Stocks are purchased by Miss Hilb through an Eastern buying agency, which enables her to get full discounts with small orders. An average inventory runs about $1,500. With this amount of stock, Miss Hilb can offer her clientele a full range selection and gross volume of approximately $50 a day. The location of the hosiery bar is such a good one, Miss Hilb feels that it is sufficient advertising in itself. A special stimulant for introductory business is used, however, in the form of a card which is presented to new customers. When this card is punched out through the sale of 12 pairs of hosiery, it is exchanged for one free pair. The Fat Men's Shop. In New York there is a men's shop on Lower 3rd Avenue which has catered for some 20 years to a special clientele, fat men. Here the oversized man can select suits, shirts, socks, shoes, and hats without the usual difficulties of being fitted in the average store. Even the clerks themselves are of whopping dimensions in order that the customer may not be embarrassed by any suggestion that he is an unusual specimen of the human race. Naturally, only in a large metropolis can a special shop such as this find a need for its very special services. Cities the size of Detroit, Cleveland, Philadelphia, Chicago, New York, San Francisco, and Los Angeles would probably offer markets large enough for such a specialty store. The same cities would also offer a market for a similar store catering to the stout woman. In smaller cities, a special department catering to stout women or men is usually located in the larger department stores. Any stout person will tell you, however, that there is much room for improvement in these departments. The alert retailer who can develop such a department to its fullest will find a corresponding increase in his income. Open a drug-less drugstore. During the Florida boom, a young woman was sent by her firm to West Palm Beach as assistant manager of a small branch. She found the new place delightful, made many friends and brought her mother to live with her. When the bottom fell out of Florida, however, the home office immediately closed the branch and recalled the staff. It was not pleasant to think of going north again, taking a clerk's job in the home office. She couldn't hope to step back in her old position, and giving up the companionship of the good friends she and her mother had made in the 5 years they had lived in West Palm Beach. She realized that she would have to find some way to make a living in Florida. But how? While buying some cold cream in a drugstore the day after the notice came to close the branch, Miss Oliver got the idea of opening a drug-less drugstore. She reasoned that there were a great many items that people went into drugstores to buy that could just as well be purchased in a small attractive shop that would cater especially to their personal needs. She had some money saved, and upon inquiry she found she could have a little shop immediately that would be quite reasonable to rent. She talked the idea over with her mother and the two of them decided to try it out. She stocked 3 good lines of cosmetics, really 3 price lines, including face powder, rouge, lipstick, creams, etc. Other purchases were 4 brands of toothpaste, 2 brands of toothbrushes, some well-known toilet waters, soaps, bath salts, manicure, instruments, suntan lotions and oils, talcums, and hair tonics. Her drug section included such daily necessities as boric acid, witch hazel, iodine, mercurochrome, nationally advertised antiseptics, corn remedies, Vaseline, sunburn remedies, rubbing alcohol, adhesive tape, gauze bandages, indigestion remedies, etc. In addition, she stocked the 4 most popular brands of cigarettes, some chewing gum, razor blades, razors, shaving cream, playing cards, a good quality of plain white stationery, and the popular magazines. At the back of the store where it was cool and inviting was the soda fountain and sandwich counter. A good grade of ice cream was carried, the usual bottled goods, and a good brand of coffee. Sandwiches were prepared only on order and the lettuce, tomatoes, and other fillings were kept fresh and crisp. No cooking was ever done in the store, consequently the place did not have that unpleasant odor so often associated with drug and other stores which serve light luncheons. While they were not aware of it, nevertheless, both mother and daughter were the sort that are exactly suited to handle a small retail business. Both were nice looking, were immaculate in appearance, had cheerful, optimistic dispositions, were friendly. They liked meeting and talking with people. And they were not afraid of long hours or hard work. Special Corner sells cosmetics. The exterior of the store was pale cream stucco and instead of the usual screen door, the screen and frame were painted chalk blue and the screen partially covered with lattice work also painted blue. This gave the store its name, the Blue Door. Blue awnings over the windows and blue hurricane shutters added to its distinctive appearance. The interior was a cool sea blue color and chairs at the tables were covered with flowered cretonne slip covers. Convenient to the cosmetic corner were a low table, a reed settee, an end table, and a deep cushioned reed chair with a tall white screen behind it. These pieces of furniture were painted white and the cushions covered in the floral cretonne. In this corner, face powders were mixed for customers and perfumes tested for their fragrance, or lipsticks examined for proper color. It was a new idea for customer and proprietor to sit down and discuss the merits of this or that product. Women who came into the shop for the first time were agreeably surprised by its charm, and in particular by this little cozy corner where one could relax, smoke a cigarette and make one's purchases at leisure. The first year was a struggle, and the second year found her almost willing to give up and go back north. There was so much work to do, so many of the sales were small items on which there was little profit, and to make matters worse, during the first 2 winters the tourist trade fell to an all-time low. However, when she talked it over with her mother, they agreed to try it another year. They were making a poor living, but they were not yet willing to say die. The third year saw a pickup in the winter tourist business which tied them over for another year. By this time they felt that if they could keep going at all, it was better to be doing something that they liked than to be making a mediocre living up north doing monotonous clerical work in an office. It is now 10 years since the little store was started, and the last 3 years have seen it grow into a real business. In spite of the depression, the store did enough business to enable the owners to make a trip north each summer, to dress nicely, to save some money and to buy a coupe. To the original departments have been added a rental library, a stock of greeting cards, and some inexpensive bridge prizes and favors. During the busy season, an attractive young girl helps out in the store part-time for pin money. She is also available when the daughter and mother wish to spend an evening with friends. While the store will never make either of them rich, they are both living well, saving money, free of debt, and are happy in their work and independence. That's the big thing in having a business of your own. It makes you feel that you are somebody after all. So even though you may not be an apothecary, you can start a drugless drugstore in your town if you have the will and a little capital to carry you through the first few months. Pups make pet store pay. It don't take much money to start a pet shop. It does take a good idea to bring people inside the pet shop, however, and this, C. Kainowski learned when he opened his pet shop on Commercial Avenue, in South Chicago. The store space was so large that when he moved in his stock of pets, cages, and accessories, the space was far from being filled. So he built a cage along the wall from the windows far back into the store. This cage is 25 feet long, 10 feet wide, and 10 feet high. It is built entirely of wooden frames covered with a fine mesh screen and cost only $36. I covered the floor of this cage with linoleum on which I spread a thick layer of bird gravel, Kainowski said, and then turned a number of canaries and other small birds loose in it. The birds were provided with nests and perches, and the whole display attracted a great deal of attention. People from the neighborhood stood and watched the birds flying around the big cage. Some came in to ask questions, and bought canaries and parakeets, generally known as love birds, on the spot. When I saw how much attention was being given this big cage, I decided to make it more attractive, and placed some tall palms around the outside to create a woodland appearance, partitioned it into sections, and told my customers I was using it as a flight breeding cage. I don't sell birds from this cage but let them breed. The young birds are removed and placed in small cages as they mature. The display value of the big cage with its nests and birds fluttering about, however, is incalculable. Display of puppies adds to profits. Birds were going well, so I partitioned a section of the window space into rough and comfortable pens. In these I placed puppies. I put puppies of ages from 3 weeks to 2 months old in the window, and you'd be surprised at the interest shown in them. This display was so effective that I was soon hard-pressed to get enough puppies to fill the demand for them. Children, especially small boys, stand for hours with their noses pressed against the glass, watching the puppies play. When these children get 75 cents or $1, they bring it in and buy a pup. Most of these dogs are just dogs. Of course, you couldn't sell a pedigreed dog for so low a price. But these dollar dogs go so fast that handling them pays more than enough for my rent and lights. To secure enough puppies was a problem until I placed a small advertisement in a neighborhood paper, offering 25 cents for puppies. In a few days, people came from near and far with puppies. These were dogs that would have been drowned or otherwise destroyed, so the owners were glad to get something for them, and to know that the pups would get a good home. One of the most important points to remember in starting a pet shop of this sort is the need for cleanliness and sanitation. Unless your shop is thoroughly cleaned once a day, it will begin to have an unpleasant odor which will repel customers as soon as they enter the door. In addition, lack of cleanliness will add to the danger of disease of both birds and puppies, and once disease has gained a foothold, you may lose your entire stock. Cedar chips sprinkled among the newspapers in the dog display window or cage will help considerably to eliminate odors. Cedar oil may also be used. In summertime, a ventilating fan at the back of the store will help to clear the air. The profits accumulating to the pet shop owner do not stop with the profits on birds, dogs, and other pets, however. There is a good profit in bird seed, bird cages, bird gravel, dog food, medicine of various kinds for young dogs, and accessories for pets. Many pet dealers include in their stock a number of aquariums containing tropical fish, and the accessories which go with aquariums for home use, such as aquatic plants, fish food, and ornaments for their home aquariums. A pet shop may be started with as little as $100 for stock and equipment, and space may be rented at a reasonable figure in a good location. Too much emphasis cannot be placed upon attractively displaying pets and accessories, since the average American's love of animals forces him to stop and watch them when they are displayed in a window. There are few easier ways of making money. Cashing in on the tropical fish vogue. 3 years ago, Ralph Watkins opened the Rainbow Aquarium in Chicago's South Shore district. He had 8 kinds of fish at that time, and 10 small tanks. Today he has 130 tanks containing 120 varieties of fish, grows his own fauna, and nets well over $1,000 a year in this fascinating business. I started with $200, said Watkins. My rent was not high. My investment in fish amounted to $100. Tanks, fauna, and accessories took my second $100, and when I turned the key in the door the first morning, I didn't have a red cent in my pocket. A few children passing on their way to school early that morning had stopped to ask the price of goldfish and went on their way. I forgot them. Late in the afternoon they returned with several others. They were eager, curious and fascinated with the few tropical and goldfish I had in the tanks and were greatly impressed by the rich coloring of the tropicals. One youngster wanted to buy a goldfish. For a moment she studied it, then solemnly said, "What will I call it?" "What's your name?" he inquired. "Sonia." "This goldfish should be called Sonia," I replied. That went over big. Before they left, each had bought 1 or 2 fish which they named after themselves or other children in the neighborhood, and I rang up $3 on the sale. Because the children liked the idea of naming the fish they bought, they came back again and again. When a fish appeared sick or died, they'd come in and say Alice has a tummy ache, or Henry died. Their parents took up the idea and laughed about it. When Alice or Henry passed out, I wouldn't know what type fish it was, so to make sure, I'd go over to their homes to see the fish before replacing it. This gave me an opportunity to explain the proper care of fish to the mothers and fathers of the children, and to point out the decorative possibilities of the more expensive fish. Soon was getting calls for tropicals that ran into money. Many of the species ordered were hard to get. Furthermore, I did not have even those tropical fish that were easily obtained. I had acquired some colored photographs of tropicals during the previous months, and carried them with me, showing them to the parents. These contacts proved valuable. As the average person knows little about fish and their care, I took this opportunity to explain how the fish should be handled. Few at first were ready to buy, stating that they had little luck with fish. So I adopted the policy of guaranteeing every fish, from the lowest priced guppy, to the highest priced angel or scale array in the shop. In each interview, in addition to telling how fish should be raised, I emphasized the fact that tropical fish of most varieties will really live for many years, if cared for properly. I interested the neighborhood in tropicals as a feature of home decoration. To add to the species I had in the store, I bought some red Hilary, silver tetra, blue gularis, red platy, blue gourami, 20 varieties of the angel or scale array which retail from 50 cents to $50 each, calico cichlidae and many others. When a man wanted to place a beautiful aquarium in his living room, I was able to show him a good assortment from which he could make selections. The buyer seldom wants a common fish when he is convinced tropicals will live. He will not hesitate to buy rare varieties, after he starts an aquarium, and buys them as readily as he buys a new chair. The advertising value of having in stock rare tropicals which sell from $15 to $100 a pair, is incalculable. Even if I never sold one, I'd think they were well worth keeping on display in the store. They do not cost me much more than the guppy to raise, and bring very high prices. Different kinds of fish require different kinds of water. Water is conditioned by plant life growing in the aquarium. Most races of tropical fish require tropical marine fauna, and because I'm the only dealer in Chicago who has a large, well-stocked store selling nothing but tropical fish and supplies, I grow in my own tanks the fauna which I sell to my customers. Raising tropical plants. I may upset some common notions about tropical plants when I say that almost all tropical fauna necessary to conditioning tropical fish are native Florida plants. Even the so-called Madagascar lily comes from Florida. This plant is easy to raise, and is pretty hardy. Some plants, however, are difficult to raise, and until you hit upon the right method of growing them, you will have little luck. For example, almost every aquarium man thinks it impossible to raise the Sagittaria guianensis, a Florida plant. They have tried it in many public aquariums with little success. It fooled me, until I accidentally discovered that this particular plant requires a great deal of room for its roots to spread out. When the roots are cramped a little, the leaves become speckled, turn brown at the edges, and presently the plant dies. After learning what it required, however, I have had no trouble with it at all. The Cryptocorin griffithii, which thrives only in sand, is the only plant from the South Seas I use. I have 4 varieties of it, and have heard there's a 5th, which I'm trying to locate. One can obtain the seed or the cuttings of plant life at a very small cost, and in a year or 2 build up a surprisingly profitable stock of marine fauna. The plants cost practically nothing to raise, but as they require a great deal of light, I keep a lamp burning over each tank all the time. I determine the price for plants and fish by the demand and the time I've had them. The longer I have them, the more I get for them. The 50-cent angel is my bread and butter fish. I raise this fish right in my shop at no expense and it sells very fast. In selling tropical fish for home aquariums, there is one point that should be stressed. The water should be conditioned by tropical flora for several days before the fish are placed in it. Water should never be changed by emptying the aquarium and putting in fresh water. Salt should not be placed in the water. Water should be turned into the aquarium only when necessary to replace evaporated water. Water just out of the spigot is such a shock to tropical fish they will die overnight. A good plan for getting your store known in a district is to appear before the natural history classes in grammar and high schools several times annually, giving a talk upon the care and feeding of fish, and the many interesting features of owning fish. Such talks might profitably be given at church gatherings and women's clubs also. Handling as a sideline such items as home aquariums, plants, fish food, decorative shells and aquarium ornaments add greatly to the profits of this interesting enterprise. Chapter 8. Promoting a small business. It is a precept of business that goods well bought are half sold, and that any man who builds a better mousetrap than his neighbor will have a path worn to his door. Like most business maxims, these are only half true. No matter how desirable the thing you are selling may be, your ability to sell it is in direct proportion to the number of people who know what you have to offer. The job of spreading that news is, for want of a better expression, called promoting a business. It is only within the last few years that the possibilities of promotions have been fully realized by businessmen. For a decade or more before the Depression, businessmen talked a great deal about the power of advertising. Advertising was held up as the modern Aladdin's lamp that brought success to all who touched it. Advertising still is a powerful business force. But gradually men have come to appreciate that advertising alone is not enough. It is just one of a number of ways to promote a business. And so we find in the up-to-date business not only a man in charge of advertising, but working hand in hand with him, a man in charge of promotion. The use of promotions as a means of short-cutting the goodwill building process, and increasing what is called store traffic, has reached its highest state of development in the department store field. Here we find the management always searching for new ideas and thinking up all sorts of things to bring people into their stores, and to get themselves talked about. One Chicago store, for example, spent thousands of dollars to put on a quality exposition. A section of the store was set aside for a display of quality products featured side by side with inferior products. The differences in value were made clear by tags and charts. Another store drew thousands of people into the China department by having prominent society women and leaders of civic organizations set dinner and tea tables, which were displayed in strategic locations. Big stores do not overlook a single trick when it comes to turning the public eye their way, and getting people to talk about them. These promotional activities are becoming increasingly important, and it behooves the smaller businessman, whether he is the proprietor of a small store in a small town or a manufacturer, to use showmanship as well as advertising in promoting his business. Showmanship in business. It is not necessary to spend thousands of dollars to put on a show that will make your business the center of interest and attention. During the depth of the Depression, a small jeweler in a little Indiana town found himself in a tight spot with his creditors. His working capital was tied up in diamonds, and at that time diamonds were a drug on the market. How could he turn these diamonds into cash and pay his bills? He found the answer in a diamond contest. This contest was based on the inherent interest which people have in diamonds, and the general lack of knowledge concerning them. The jeweler arranged a display of diamonds in his window, and announced that he had prepared a series of questions about the stones. He further explained that he would award, on a certain day, a valuable diamond ring to the person who submitted the most complete answers to his list of questions. He had some handbills prepared, which were distributed door to door announcing the contest. He advertised in the newspapers. He got the school teachers interested. In fact, so great was the local interest in the promotion that he was asked by the Rotary Club and the Chamber of Commerce to address luncheon meetings on the subject of diamonds. But in order to participate in the contest, it was necessary for you to go to his store twice, once to get the list of questions and again to deposit your answers to the questions. That was the hook. What happened? Not only did this jeweler make his store the main topic of conversation in town for more than a month, but hundreds of people became interested in diamonds as an article of jewelry and as an investment. He quickly sold out his stock of stones and had to buy more. And that happened in 1932 when the banks were closed, and it was fashionable to be broke. Another surefire way to promote either a small or a large business is to hitch your wagon to a star, some celebrity who is visiting town. Then there is that old reliable stunt of balloon parades. Recently Shell Petroleum opened a new filling station in St. Louis. Seldom, if ever, was a Hollywood opening more colorful than this service station opening. Clowns were on hand to service an old Model T Ford. Executives in full dress clothes serviced other cars, and girls from the local Shell offices, dressed as chorus girls, helped entertain the crowds. More than 2,000 cars were serviced in 24 hours. Giant spotlights lit up the premises, bands played and speeches were made. St. Louis was fully conscious of the new station's opening. One of the cleverest and best planned pieces of showmanship was the stunt staged in big department stores by Westinghouse to promote its refrigerators. This company arranged with department stores to hold a style show. As the audience assembled in the auditorium, there appeared a row of Westinghouse refrigerators. Suddenly, from behind the refrigerators appeared a group of beautiful girls in negligee. The idea was that this scene represented Milady's busy day. From the refrigerator she took the makings of breakfast. Breakfast over, the girls disappeared behind the refrigerators, and from out of sight of the audience the filmy, lacy garments they had been wearing were thrown over the refrigerators. By this time the audience was shivering in anticipation. Perhaps the girls would appear next, in attire suitable only for a nudist party. But the next appearance showed them attired for a morning activity of one kind or another, riding, tennis, or other sports. After showing the sports costumes, the girls retired again behind the refrigerators, changed to a costume suitable for luncheon. Each appearance called for a visit to the refrigerator. This program was carried out through a typical day of a busy woman, until supposedly late at night when the wives appeared with their husbands, ostensibly from a late theater party or a bridge game, to raid the refrigerator for a midnight snack. Here was a double-edged promotion. First, Westinghouse got over the essential idea that a refrigerator was about the most important tool in a busy woman's activities, always on the job, always ready to serve in any emergency food crisis, always saving time for the busy woman. Second, it provided a new idea and a new background for a style show, gave several departments of the store an opportunity to display many different costumes, including negligee, sports, afternoon, dinner, evening, and bathing, besides dozens of accessories, so important in modern fashions. A particularly spectacular stunt in showmanship was the famous transcontinental trainload of movie stars and electrical equipment which General Electric hauled across the country early in 1933. A brilliantly decorated train, with coaches equipped with demonstration kitchens, and loaded with movie stars such as Leo Carrillo, Bette Davis, Lyle Talbot, Tom Mix and others, visited many towns and was thrown open for public inspection. Thousands of people thronged through the train and visited the dealer's showroom where the stars were in the reception line. This train pointed up the General Electric sales campaign and took the dealers' minds off the bank failures which became nationwide, just when the train reached Cleveland on its eastward journey. While the smaller businessman cannot, of course, undertake promotions of this magnitude himself, it is usually possible for him to tie in with national activities and thus bring to his business whatever local sales value they might have. Promoting a business with premiums. Everybody likes to get something for nothing. Even though it is a fact that there is no such thing in business as getting something for nothing, this time-honored method of attracting customers is as good as ever. Among the great American business institutions which have been built up on gifts are the William Wrigley Jr. Co., makers of Spearmint Gum, the Jewel Tea Company, food products, and the James S. Kirk Company, makers of American Family Soap. Each of these companies was started the same way, giving away something with every sale made to the consumer. The story is told of a small soap manufacturer who made a powdered soap that was especially good for washing dishes. When he tried to sell it to dealers, they all gave him the runaround. They said, "Our shelves are loaded with a dozen brands of soap powder. We cannot afford to tie up any money in soap. Go out and create a demand for your powder, and then we will stock it." That was a stickler. How could he create a demand without capital? It took far more money than he had to put on an advertising campaign, and it was difficult to get enough volume selling door to door. That night he talked his problem over with his wife, who was a practical sort of person. "I'll tell you what," she said, "we have enough money to buy 10 gross of hand towels, and you can get them at a low price from the mills in Newburysport. Offer to give a towel away free with every purchase of 2 packages of soap powder. I'll bet you anything you like that any store in town will be glad to give you a window. It would draw the crowds, and that is what every storekeeper wants." The idea of a free hand towel with every 2 package purchase caught on like wildfire. The merchant who cooperated with the soap maker and put in the first window sold hundreds of packages. The manufacturer was soon being solicited by storekeepers who, only a week before, refused to have anything to do with his soap powder. They just could not stand by and see the women all going to their competitor to get the advantage of the special deal he was offering on soap powder. Another way to promote a small business is by enlisting the aid of the school children. Just how this can be done depends, of course, upon the nature of your business. But a live American youngster is just about the best press agent you can hire, and best of all, his services may be obtained at a trifling cost. An unusual shaped rubber balloon, offered on Saturdays with purchases of a certain amount, is almost certain to bring dozens of doting mothers into a store with their young hopefuls in tow. Simple puzzles, that can be bought for as little as 2 cents, draw the youngsters like magnets. Kites, fire chief hats, crossword puzzles, stamp albums, magic sets, pop-out or cut-out sets, paper dolls, and clown hats are other premiums that have been used to attract children. About 2 years ago there was a craze for masks, and their use as premiums stimulated the sale of many a slow-moving product. These masks included comic strip characters, movie stars, clowns, etc. Direct mail advertising. One of the great wastes in promoting what might be called a limited appeal business is spending money to contact people who are not prospects. It might be all right to stand on a street corner and shout your wares to all who pass, if you have something to sell to the masses. But if you can sell only to people with a certain amount of money, or to owners of automobiles, or to farmers, or to some other specific class of people, then it is important in planning a promotional activity, whether it involves showmanship or advertising, or both, to pick those upon whom your effort is to be expended. The more you concentrate your promotional effort, the more resultful and effective it will be. That is where direct mail advertising comes in. It enables you to handpick those with whom you wish to do business, and focus your entire sales promotional effort on them. The first step in using direct mail is to build a mailing list. A good mailing list is the backbone of a business, and that holds just as true of the large business as it does of the small business. It is not enough to take a telephone directory and call it a mailing list. That is just a list of names. A mailing list is something more. It is a list of people you definitely know to be prospects for what you have to sell. These names may be obtained through your own personal acquaintance, through friends, or by having a survey made by some person employed for the task. As a rule, the money you invest in getting a good live mailing list is about the best investment you can make. Having compiled such a list, do not stop there. Spend a few dollars more for an addressing machine and make the most of the names. You can buy a small hand addressing machine for as low as $25. You can use it not only to address advertisements to your mailing list, but also to print postcard announcements. You will find such equipment a big dividend producer. Remember that a mailing list is no more valuable than the number of times it is used. Get something out regularly, the more often, the better. Keep the mailing list alive by adding steadily to the list of prospective customers. One of the best sources for obtaining names of desirable prospective customers, the store's own salespeople, has been overlooked or ignored by a majority of merchants. Contest for increasing a store's list. By making the listing of possible new customers a game among their salespeople, the Tully Abbott Company almost doubled the store's list within 2 weeks and impressed employees with the value of the names to the establishment. The contest also had a beneficial effect since its termination, all of the clerks continuing to turn in names to be added to the store's mailing list. The contest was announced through a bulletin addressed to employees by the management. It was to run for 2 weeks. Employees were provided with special forms and asked to submit the names of people which they did not believe to be on the store's books or records at the time. It was expressly stated that good names were those who, because of some quality of standing, wealth, or social position, might be desirable prospects to buy merchandise of the establishment. 3 prizes were awarded. The employee submitting the greatest number of accepted names was given a $25 certificate entitling him or her to select merchandise of that value as a reward. The employee turning in the next greatest number was presented with a $10 certificate, and the one contributing the third greatest number was rewarded with a $5 certificate. To guard against employees turning in names of no value as prospects, one of the questions included on the form was, "Why do you feel this person is a desirable prospective customer?" A number of names were thrown out because the persons listed were unemployed or had no satisfactory business or family connections. Other names discarded included those already on the books or submitted during the contest by some other employee. Each entry declined for contest credit was turned back to the employee who submitted it with the reason for its refusal clearly stated. At a time when waste in advertising is a particularly heavy tax on business, a great many retail executives may find the Tully Abbott plan worth considering. When a list is top-heavy with worthless names, a mailing has a hard time paying out. Inaccurate lists entail a great waste of postage, time and material. The plan reviewed here is one that any merchant, regardless of line, may convert to his use. The awards may be increased, decreased, or dispensed with altogether, without seriously affecting the success of the plan. Honorable mention and a daily list of the standings of contestants would probably prove almost as successful as the use of awards in cash. How to make newspaper advertising pay. For the average small business depending mainly upon one locality for patronage, the accepted means of promotion is newspaper advertising. Just as direct mail advertising has an advantage in selecting prospects, so newspaper advertising has an advantage in creating mass acceptance. It is the least expensive of all advertising, based on contacts made per dollar expended. It is particularly useful to those operating a retail business in a community served by a good newspaper. Yet, like any other form of sales promotion, newspaper advertising must be rightly used or not at all. Too many businessmen regard advertising as something they can do when they feel flush, or they wait for some special occasion and then take an advertisement in the newspaper. Such hit-or-miss effort is not likely to do you, or the newspaper publisher, much good. The only effective way to make newspaper advertising pay is to have a plan, not a plan for a few weeks or a few months, but a plan for 3 years. In setting up your plan, decide first of all just what you expect your newspaper advertising to do. You want it to attract new customers, of course. But more than that, you want it to build up in your community certain definite impressions about your business and its ability to serve. You know, or should know, that it is going to take time to create such an impression. Taking an advertisement once in a while certainly will not do it. You have to advertise regularly, using a certain style of copy and building your advertising story around one dominating idea which the public will associate with your business. Keep repeating that dominant idea over and over and over again. There will come times when you weary of it. But remember that good advertising is repetition. To quote the motto of a famous advertising agency, keeping everlastingly at it brings success. New ideas and changes of copy are all right. Change your copy as frequently as you wish. But see to it that your advertising holds fast to two anchors, a distinctive style that gives it individuality, and a dominant idea. To illustrate these principles in action, and to show you what a tremendous force well-planned advertising can be in promoting a small business, a few examples follow showing how small beginnings grew into good-sized businesses through the untiring and intelligent use of good advertising backed by persistence. How Harding built a restaurant business. When John P. Harding opened his first Chicago restaurant, people paid little attention to it. It was just another addition to the hundreds of restaurants in Chicago. The general public and restaurant people expected him to have a fair business for a while. Then the restaurant would settle down to a normal enterprise that would do well if it broke even. Some even said there were then too many restaurants in Chicago and Harding was foolish to start another. Harding had a different idea, however, and his amazing success in the Chicago restaurant field, last year he served 5 million people, proves he knows how to ring the bell so far as attracting trade is concerned. There were several reasons why people came to Harding's. Good food was possibly most important. But the thousands upon thousands of first-time customers had to be sold on Harding's service before they bought their first meal. Harding recognized this fact. He got them to come by appealing to them through small advertisements in morning newspapers. The unique angle of the Harding advertising, the semi-humorous twist to the copy, and the cartoons illustrating these advertisements did the trick for him. But he didn't stop with just small copy. He planned his advertising in advance, and when the copy appeared, one window of the restaurant was always trimmed effectively to tie up with the newspaper story. He began by featuring corned beef and cabbage in the advertising, and soon was known as the Corned Beef King. Then he featured other special dishes. Soon he had many people calling at his restaurants to discover the secret of his good food, and they kept coming. The windows frequently were trimmed with enlarged photographs of delectable food products, and the advertisements were planned to tie in with the seasonal eating habits of the public. Thus, just before Lent, and during Lent, the advertisements carried announcements of Lenten dishes. Shortly after the Prohibition Amendment was repealed, Harding ran an advertisement about ham, illustrated by a laughing little pig sitting in a glass of champagne. The copy follows. Storemanship these days is as much a matter of showmanship as salesmanship. Here is how one business showman, operating a chain of stores in California, attracts trade. At night the soulful eyes of the pup are lighted up. Evan McManany is a Los Angeles florist who believes that if people won't come to his show, he will take the show to the people. Few businessmen fully capitalize the promotional possibilities of their delivery system. Ham Happiness. Years ago, before Prohibition became a fact, the old Righeimer bar at 131 North Clark Street, now Harding's, was famous for its very unique treatment of ham. They didn't simply slice off a piece of ham and place it between two slices of bread. Oh no. First they dipped the ham into the most delectable concoction imaginable, champagne sauce. Well, Harding's have resurrected the recipe, and now, at all Harding restaurants, the carver dips the slices of our perfectly baked sugar-cured ham into champagne sauce before making up the sandwich. Of course, if you prefer not to have the sauce, just tell the carver. But it is good. The price is still 15c. From the time these advertisements appeared in Chicago's morning papers, Harding's restaurants became crowded daily. The cost of the advertising each day was about $75. This expenditure, however, more than justified itself. In smaller communities, where the cost of advertising is not very great, this same adverting would run but $3 or $4, and the results would be proportionally greater. Harding's advertising ideas may be used to good advantage to tell people about your roadside stand or small restaurant. The same advertising appeal he uses would attract people from near and far. Harding spent quite a lot of money in equipment and fixtures. By securing used equipment, however, you may start your restaurant with as small an amount as $300. The appeal may be enhanced in trimming windows by using enlarged photographs of the dishes you serve. Your local photographer will take these photographs for you and enlarge them to any size you wish for $3 or $4. By consulting your local newspaper publisher when planning your advertising, you may secure advance notice of special occasions which might connect up nicely with your advertising. There are few more lucrative forms of business than a well-managed restaurant whose owner takes advantage of the many money-making opportunities advertising offers. A change in policy started a laundry on the road to leadership. Like a great many other men in the laundry business, B.C. McClellan never took advertising seriously. To him it was just one of those things. He would buy an advertisement now and then just to be a good fellow and to make himself think he was advertising. Naturally, it never paid. One day while having luncheon with a group of men, he voiced the old complaint that advertising doesn't pay. A young advertising man in the group said, "You are wrong, advertising does pay. But perhaps your advertising doesn't pay. And I think I can tell you why, even without having any facts about your method of advertising. You have no plan, no campaign. Isn't that right? You just take an advertisement because you think you should advertise." Mr. McClellan had to admit that the man was right. The result of that talk was a little conference with the advertising man and the preparation of a plan. When Mr. McClellan saw the plan, he was flabbergasted. It called for an expenditure of $5,000 over a period of 1 year. The idea of a laundry that was handling only 4,000 bundles a week, spending $5,000 for advertising, took his breath away. But the advertising man persisted, and finally Mr. McClellan agreed to try his plan. As the advertisements began to appear and the bills began to come in, Mr. McClellan felt tempted to withdraw from the arrangement. But he didn't. Then the advertising began to take hold. It wasn't long before the business grew from 4,000 to 18,000 bundles a week. The advertising continued to pull. A dry cleaning business was started. The goodwill which Mr. McClellan's advertising has built up assures its success. Methods were improved. Other laundries were opened. Within 10 years it has grown to be the largest laundry in the world. Today there are McClellan establishments called the Laundry and Dry Cleaning Service Incorporated, in 14 cities. A $5,000 advertising acorn grew into a $10 million business. Milo Jones started his sausage business with a $30 advertisement. About 50 years ago, the preacher in charge of the circuit of which Fort Atkinson, Wisconsin, was a part, took dinner at the farm of Brother Milo Jones. Instead of serving the regulation yellow-legged chicken, the main feature of the meal was farm sausage of Mrs. Jones's making. The pastor complimented Mrs. Jones profusely on the delicious flavor of the sausage. As he traveled the circuit he praised Sister Jones's sausage to other members of his flock. Jones's farm sausage was soon in demand. One day the thought came to Mr. Jones that if people in nearby cities knew about his good wife's sausage, it might be possible to sell more. So he decided to advertise. Being a conservative New Englander, his first advertising was very modest, just a few inches in a Fort Atkinson newspaper. But it brought results. Before Milo Jones knew it, his sausage had become famous throughout Wisconsin. Then he went after Chicago distribution, spending, of course, a little more on advertising. In spite of the fact that he charged 10 cents a pound more for his sausage, it soon became nationally famous and was featured by leading hotels all over the country. The Joneses' business is not large compared to the great packing companies. It has purposely been held down by members of the family who were more concerned with their reputation than their fortune. Nevertheless, it is one of the romances of American business success, illustrating, as it does, the possibilities of building a national business by expanding a market one step at a time with advertising. Restaurant which caters to children. A restaurant owner in a Middle Western town has built up a lucrative sideline in his business by catering to children. He has special menus made up listing wholesome dishes for children. Each dish, needless to say, is attractively prepared to entice the most fickle appetite. The preparation of this food does not entail any special labor, as many of the dishes appear on the regular menu under different names. The children's menus have a border of children in silhouette, romping, jumping rope and playing marbles. The figures are stickers secured from a local novelty store and simply pasted on the daily menus. The portions listed on the children's menus are usually smaller than those on the usual bill of fare. Another idea which has paid him well is preparing special parties for children. If you understand youngsters, you know that any one of them would rather have a party in a restaurant than in his own home. A restaurant party makes a child feel so important and grown up. Because his restaurant is in a neighborhood of homes and small apartment buildings, there is an opportunity to cater to quite a few children. He has also increased the number of his youthful patrons by contacting the churches and schools in the neighborhood, giving the youngsters special prices as inducements for holding their parties and suppers in his place. Bridge Prize puts over home library. It is easy to start a circulating library, but it is not so easy to get customers. So when Mrs. Gertrude Murphy started a library in her home, she decided to do something spectacular and unusual to attract customers. She had previously used a rental library operated in a neighborhood drugstore in Chicago and found that the main reason the druggist lost readers was his unwillingness to add new books to the library. 3 or 4 months would pass before the latest fiction was available. "I'll start a library and specialize on bestsellers," Mrs. Murphy decided. To get going quickly, she adopted the door prize idea, commonly used at bridge parties. Each time a member came in to rent a book, she was given a small piece of pasteboard on which the date was stamped. The member wrote her name and address on this card and dropped it into a box. On Wednesdays and Saturdays of each week, the names of 3 members were drawn from this box, and prizes, usually inexpensive articles such as ashtrays, handkerchiefs, or dishes, were given the lucky winners. Mrs. Murphy's plan for operating the library was similar to that of the drugstores. Books were rented at 3 cents a day and a $1 membership fee was required. This membership fee was used to buy additional books, and in less than a month she had 190 books on her shelves. Meanwhile, 80 members were enrolled by the door prize feature. Women frequently took out books for their husbands and daughters. At the end of this first month, Mrs. Murphy discovered that each member averaged 2 books a day. Her only investment was $15 spent at the outset for books, the membership and rental fees being sufficient to cover all other expenses. You can start a rental library on a similar plan with 20 books. Order direct from publishers or wholesale booksellers who will give you a special discount. Well-selected books pay for themselves in rentals many times over before they lose their popularity. It is advisable to have 2 or 3 copies of bestsellers on your shelves in order to meet the demand. The library can be conducted from your home, or you may be able to make arrangements with some real estate office to give you desk space for a few dollars a month. You can pick up enough magazine subscriptions, if you are on your toes, to pay the rent. Obtain an agency from the American News Company, New York City, or one of the large subscription agencies such as the Franklin Square Agency of New York. These companies publish catalogs listing all the magazines and quoting a dealer's discount, which is usually about 25%. Returnable containers pep up sales. Great businesses have been built around a simple merchandising idea. Uneeda Biscuits, for instance. Before the National Biscuit Company hit upon the idea of putting up soda crackers in 5-cent sealed cartons, people always bought them sparingly because they were hard to keep crisp. The soda crackers are probably no better than they were before the sealed package was introduced, but that idea made the business. Today all sorts of things are sold in airtight packages. The same opportunity for clever packaging exists today in such products as cookies, butter, honey, and various specialties made in home kitchens. If you know how to bake good cookies, and offer them to a regular list of customers neatly packed in airtight cookie tins, which you pick up when the next tin is delivered, you have a merchandising idea that will greatly simplify marketing your product. As a matter of fact, one woman in Naperville, Illinois, built a profitable cookie business doing that very thing. A farmer in Geneva, Wisconsin, had the idea of delivering butter in sealed 3 and 5 pound crocks instead of the usual bricks. The crocks were designed to fit into a small electrical refrigerator, and had a clamp to hold the cover on tight. In this way the butter was protected from odors that it would otherwise absorb. The customer made a deposit of 25 cents when she bought the first crock of butter, and the farmer picked up the empties very much as a milkman picks up his milk bottles. These returnable containers enabled him to increase his unit of sale. Another example, a woman in Ticonderoga, New York, who specialized in putting up strawberry jam, doubled her sales when she thought of putting up the jam in the very latest style beer glasses generally known as Pilsners, instead of the usual preserved glass. They cost but very little more, and since Prohibition had just been repealed and every woman needed up-to-date glasses for setting her table, the utility value of the glass proved to be just the needed inducement. An advertising adventure blazed the path of success for Weber's Bakery. In Los Angeles, everybody knows about Weber's bread. But that was not the case back in 1926. Dale Weber's Bakery was then just one of the many bakeries that served that community. One day Weber's Bakery was singled out for an attack by organized labor. Mr. Weber decided to lay his case before the public through advertising. He not only won his case, but found something even more valuable: faith in the power of advertising. That newfound faith proved to be the turning point in the growth of the Weber Baking Company. When Weber began advertising, his bakery operated 18 trucks. A year after he had launched his program, which called for an investment of $2,000 a month, his business had grown to 42 trucks. He decided to plow back 31 cents out of every dollar he took in, for advertising. By the end of the second year, his fleet had grown to 65 trucks. But he did not stop there. He pyramided his advertising. Business continued to grow. In another year, the bakery was operating 84 trucks, and by the end of the fourth year of advertising, 110 trucks were required to service his steadily expanding trade. A growth, roughly, of 500% in 4 years. Of course, advertising alone did not accomplish this noteworthy result. But it did play an important part. Who can say that had not Dale Weber, fighting with his back to the wall, made that initial appropriation for advertising, what might have happened to his business? But he did make it. How $150 a month advertising built a $10 million business. Back in 1905, M. G. Gibbs opened a drug store in Washington, D.C. His friends told him he was foolish, that there were already too many drug stores in Washington, and that there was no money to be made in the drug business anyway. But Gibbs figured that there was always room at the top regardless of how crowded the field might be. He believed that if a business had distinctive policies and kept telling people about them, day in and day out, it was bound to be successful. So he took his capital of $9,000 and set $2,000 of it aside for an all-year advertising program. This gave him $150 a month for his advertising. Then he took the remainder and bought fixtures and stock with it. Perhaps the fact that Gibbs was the son of a small-town publisher had something to do with the faith he had in advertising. But he stuck to his plan in spite of all discouragements, and when the year closed, his sales totaled $22,000. Not a bad first year's business back in 1905. Today the People's Drug Stores are as well known in Washington as the White House. They do a volume in excess of $10 million annually. Dun & Bradstreet gives the company a $1 billion credit rating. Druggists from all over the country come to Washington to study the Gibbs methods. But the real secret of the success, according to an interview which Mr. Gibbs gave to Printers Inc., is his year in and year out policy of plowing back 2% of his sales into advertising. It is inconceivable to me, he said, how any retailer would attempt to operate without a consistent plan of advertising. Open-air market brings added profits. A number of years ago, a grocer owning his own store in a Chicago suburb purchased the adjoining lot on the corner because he had a chance to get it cheap and thought he might want to enlarge his store someday. One day on a trip out into the country, it occurred to him that the roadside stands were doing an excellent business on fruit and vegetables that were no better than his own. The prices, too, were about in line with his. He thought of the vacant lot alongside his store and decided to make an experiment. The next week, he had a carpenter build some stands and some uprights in the vacant space. A colorful striped awning was stretched from the side of the store to the uprights, and the stands were loaded with vegetables and fruits. There was plenty of parking space across the street. Almost from the start, this addition to his store brought new customers. He kept it open from early spring until late fall and found that practically all of the new customers, attracted by the open-air market, continued to buy during the winter when the market was closed. The construction of the market required about $850. Put through this outlay, he cleared around $7,500 net and increased his business in staples considerably at the same time. Mixing a good time with good food. 4 months ago, Howard Stevens rented a vacant house on a 10-acre tract 15 miles from Detroit, Michigan, along a much-traveled highway, and here established a wayside inn. He stocked a few cases of beer, and some sandwich meats, but did very little business the first month. Then he decided to doll up the place. During the past 2 months, the result of his improvements has been to attract an increasingly large number of customers to his place, and his profits have climbed. I discovered that to draw people you must have something besides a few old tables and chairs and a couple bottles of beer, said Stevens. So I paid $275 down on used bar fixtures and restaurant equipment, and agreed to pay off the balance of $640 in monthly payments. I got a couple of local carpenters and had them refinish the floor in the big room of the house for dancing, and along the sides of this room I then placed black and silver colored glass top tables of a modern, though inexpensive, design. I was lucky getting a semicircular bar, and some long panel mirrors to hang behind it. My initial investment, all told, came to $407, including the refrigerator and range for cooking. I had a couple of electric automatic fryers, and a grill and roaster in which I was able to roast up to 9 chickens, or 4 pork loins at one time. To let people know about what I had to offer them, I had 17 signs painted and placed at strategic points along the road. Each sign featured a different type barbecued meat sandwich. I had the sandwich featured painted in colors and placed a price of 15 cents on each. Then in large letters, was the name of my stand, and the distance from the sign to the inn. That first night I opened was surprising to me. Between 6 and 9, 119 cars stopped and an average of 3 people came in from each car. My wife and I tried to take care of them, but we ran out of supplies at 9:30. We did volume enough to indicate future success, however. We spent all the next day roasting chickens, pork loins, and beef cuts, and the business that night was unusual. Many stayed a little while to dance and the small dance floor was crowded. Music was furnished by a good radio picking up a hotel dance program from Detroit. People out in the country in their cars like to stop somewhere, rest and eat. If there's a little dancing, they'll stay longer. They don't like to feel they are paying excessive prices for food, however, and about 15 cents is all they'll pay for a sandwich. This is a profitable price. The average check runs 40 cents for each person. And as much as there is a gross profit of 50% on sales, we are doing nicely. Each week since he added the new equipment, Stevens has served 603 customers. He has 2 girls helping him take care of the business and pays them each $15 a week. His net profit for the week, after paying all expenses, averages $89.67. There are many such opportunities for opening wayside stands near big cities. Profits may be increased by placing a few pin games near the cash register, and by serving cold drinks. Using one product to sell another. One enterprising hardware merchant had a stock of bird cages on hand which were moving very slowly. As considerable money was tied up in this stock, he worried about ways and means of selling it. Finally he hit upon an idea. He purchased 400 canary birds and offered them at $3.87, or practically at cost. The sale was advertised in the newspaper. His idea sold the 400 birds, 150 bird cages priced from $2.98 to $35, as well as many hardware items. Chapter 9. Selling things by mail. Many great fortunes have been made in the mail order business, even though it is one of the most exacting and difficult methods of making money. In addition to skill as a buyer, a successful mail order merchandiser requires a keen sense of dramatic values and sound sales promotional judgment. Given these attributes, it is possible for an energetic person, with a small amount of capital, to start a mail order business on a modest scale and successfully develop it into a prosperous and worthwhile business. The mail order business is essentially American in its conception and scope. It is a byproduct of the development of the West, when impassable roads and great distances made it difficult for people living on farms or in small towns to get a satisfactory selection of merchandise. The industry is scarcely 50 years old, yet in that short time it has developed sales running well over $1 billion annually. This figure is interesting because it reflects a confidence on the part of the public in ordering by mail that is truly remarkable, when you consider that the method requires a person to buy sight unseen. The buying impression is created by the printed word, and the buyer must send his money on faith, depending only upon the assurance of the seller that his money will be refunded if he is not entirely satisfied. The first mail order house to do a national, big-scale business was established in 1872 by A. Montgomery Ward and George R. Thorne in a small room at 825 North Clark Street, Chicago. The initial capital was slightly over $2,400. Ward conceived the idea of selling for cash, direct by mail, while employed as a clerk in St. Joseph, Michigan. Lack of capital prevented him from putting his idea into execution at the time. To make the needed money, he secured a position as a traveling salesman for a St. Louis house. That was in 1871. He finally accumulated $1,600, which was a sizable sum in those days, and persuaded his friend George Thorne, of Kalamazoo, Michigan, to go into partnership with him in Chicago. The firm's first catalog, a little pamphlet 3 by 5 inches in size, listing a few widely used dry goods items, was issued in 1874. This was the forerunner of the giant mail order catalog which is issued today. While credit for the idea of selling by mail belongs to Montgomery Ward, the great strides which the industry made in public acceptance of the principle of buying by mail are due to the pioneering work of Richard W. Sears, who was a better promotion man than Ward. He had a flair for dressing up the sales package that is one of the essential qualifications of a good mail order man. For that reason, the story of his rise to fame and fortune should be of particular interest to anyone contemplating going into the mail order business. Much can be gained by studying his approach to the varied problems that the new business presented, and the development of some of his policies. The story of how Sears laid the foundation for the great Sears, Roebuck business is told elsewhere in this chapter. Essentials of a mail-order business. Contrary to general belief, it is not practical to sell everything and anything by mail. It must be remembered that conditions have changed a great deal since A. Montgomery Ward started his business. Good roads, the automobile and chain stores have narrowed the opportunities for general mail-order operations until mail-order selling has become too speculative for the man of small capital. But while the opportunities may be fewer for starting a general mail-order business, the door is wide open for starting a specialized business. National advertising, the radio and the movies have done one thing for the American merchant that is not always appreciated. They have created a multiplicity of new wants, they have sharpened tastes, they have made people dissatisfied with the garden variety of things bought in stores and have made them receptive to the specialized appeal. So we may set it down as principle number one in starting a mail-order business that there must be something distinctive and different either about what you are selling, or about the way that you sell it. People will buy most easily things which they are not able to buy in local stores, or because they feel that they are obtaining a definite price advantage. It is interesting to note, in this connection, that what gave Richard Sears his start on the road to success was not the kind of watches he sold but the way he sold them. When he became station agent at North Redwood, Minnesota, he had had some experience selling unclaimed merchandise. He found that people would pay top prices for such merchandise under the impression that they were profiting by another's misfortune. So he conceived the idea of buying watches at wholesale, and sending them to fictitious names in care of other ticket agents. When the ticket agent wrote him that the watch had not been called for, Sears wrote back to sell the watch at a certain price, and deduct a commission for making the sale. While this is hardly a method that would succeed in these days of high standards of business practice, the principle which Sears used, that is to say staging the sale, is just as effective today as it was then. It is not enough merely to offer to sell a man, there must be a reason why he should buy. Since buying by mail requires complete confidence of the purchaser and the seller, the name of the company or business is important. Use Anglo-Saxon names, if possible. One of the big mail-order houses, which successfully sold women's wear by mail for a number of years before being merged with another company, was the Charles Williams Stores of New York. This was just a name. There was no Mr. Charles, nor was there any Mr. Williams. Had Morris Rosenbaum used his own name when he started the National Cloak and Suit Company, it is doubtful if it would have been so successful. Generally speaking, it is better to use an easily remembered family name than a corporate name. People are funny about names. They like to do business with other individuals like themselves. They want to feel that if they are not satisfied with their purchase that they can write to the proprietor of the business and raise the dickens. It is less satisfactory to bawl out a corporation. Similarly, there is a widespread notion that people with Anglo-Saxon names are more trustworthy than people with foreign names. It is only a feeling, of course, but when you are asking man to send you his money solely on your guarantee of satisfaction, you cannot afford to disregard even such trifling details as public whims. Importance of repeat orders. The backbone of a successful mail-order business is its list of regular customers. While it is possible to buy lists of people who buy by mail, and there are numerous directories from which names may be selected, it is a mistake to think that a profitable business can be built up entirely from such names. True, some business can be obtained in that way, but usually the cost of getting the business will absorb all the profit. With a good mailing list, the bulk of which consists of names of people who have expressed an interest in what you are selling, either by answering your advertisements or by having placed previous orders, selling costs can be controlled. The following table, showing costs of sales by mail to the consumer, is taken from Wadsworth's Mail Order Handbook. Auto tires, 3.5%. Hardware, 8%. Auto supplies, 6%. Jewelry, 12%. Bicycles, 8%. Lighting fixtures, 10%. Books, 20%. Men's clothing, 8%. Fashions, 10%. Pianos, 8%. Furniture, 8%. Reticket houses, 3%. Gas engines, 9%. Shoes, 5%. Groceries, 5%. Underwear, 6%. It will be noted that most of the above items represent products for which a demand exists. When it comes to products for which a demand must be created, selling costs are much greater. For example, it costs almost 33% to sell a home training course by mail. Many publishers figure the cost of selling $2 subscriptions at 100%. They must depend entirely upon their renewals for a profit. A good rule to follow in selling products which are not in demand is to price them at 3 times their production cost. This formula applied, let us say, to an article priced to sell for $3, allows $1 for manufacturing cost, $1 for selling cost, and $1 for overhead and profit. The usual percentage of returns on mailings to new names is between 2 and 6%, depending upon the acceptance which the product has and the manner in which it is presented. On the other hand, returns from a mailing directed to lists of known customers will run anywhere from 10 to 20%. These figures will serve to illustrate the importance of the repeat quality of a product, if it is to be successfully sold by mail, and the necessity of building the whole business around a list of known buyers. Too much emphasis cannot be laid on the importance of good copy and selling by mail. The difference between a well-written letter or catalog and one that is indifferently written and produced can make all the difference between a profit and a loss. There are no hard and fast rules which can be laid down for writing result-getting copy, because very often success lies in breaking all the rules and striking out boldly along unblazed paths. The following suggestions by Ralph Wadsworth, well known as a successful mail-order copywriter, may prove helpful however. Writing copy to sell by mail. If anyone thinks that mail-order copy is easy, let him try it. You will be surprised how many essential selling points you overlook. What they can mean to your sales is best illustrated by the following. In Illinois, a certain farmer made up his mind to buy a cream separator. Unable to make a decision from Montgomery Ward's and Sears, Roebuck's catalogs, he hitched up his horse and buggy and drove around among his neighbors. Those with Sears separators acknowledged they were good, the ones using Ward's were just as sure that theirs were the best. So he returned home undecided, until his wife pointed out that Sears copy read guaranteed 255 IBs. And Ward's just said, 190 pounds. Sears got the sale. As a matter of fact, the lesser weight is an advantage, but the Ward advertising man had failed to capitalize the fact in the advertising copy. Because mail-order copy sells sight unseen, you must be very careful to have it cover every selling point, especially the appeals to the five senses. Let us, for example, say that you are asked to write copy for a new velvet dress to sell at $25. You might say, in the usual copy style, "What woman would not be delighted to appear in this beautiful velvet gown, $25. From a mail-order standpoint, you would have overlooked many vital features needed to close a sale. You have not said anything about the style, the use, the comparative value, the kind of velvet, its wearing qualities, the trimmings, whether suitable for misses or women, the colors, sizes, approximate length, and perhaps sweep. To be complete, your copy should run something like this. What woman would not be delighted to appear in this last-minute model of rich-looking silk chiffon velvet, smartly finished with new/sleeves of good quality silk satin? Just the thing for afternoon or informal party wear. The material will give you excellent wear, and the price quoted represents unusual value. Lean crew, 40 to 44 inches, according to size. Women's sizes, 34 to 44, coaters, navy blue, red and brown. Special price, $25. It does not appear difficult to write mail-order advertising for fashions, furniture or cream separators, but until you have had plenty of practice you will be surprised how many essential features you will leave out of your copy. This training is a great help in handling general advertising copy, for it makes you careful to see that you do not overlook any points of selling value. Your copy to retailers must naturally stress different points, but there are certain essential elements that must not be overlooked. You must emphasize the profits to be made, the big demand and the popularity of your article, the exceptional value it represents at the price you quote, as well as stating the material, sizes, weights or other information needed in order for your dealer to send in his order. The above dress copy rewritten to the dealer should read somewhat like the following. This new Parisian model of good quality silk chiffon velvet is a fast seller in the New York market and should be very popular with your trade. Its satin/sleeves are a feature in great demand. At our exceptionally low price, this unusual number carries a good profit. Women's sizes, 34 to 44. Colors, navy blue, red and dark brown. Prices, each $16, in quantities of 6 or more, specially priced, each at $15. You will note that copy to the retailer does not need to be so long as that to the consumer. Your dealer has a better conception of merchandise and does not require as much detail. Your terms, your guarantee and general reputation will have a great bearing on whether he sends you an order or not. The first and last thing he is interested in is profits. That's the angle you will emphasize the most. What can be profitably sold by mail? As stated at the beginning of this chapter, the building up of a demand for a product which is presented through the mails to a possible buyer depends upon the way it is staged. It must have some distinctive quality, or there must be a distinctive plan for presenting it. For that reason, it is desirable to build your mail-order business around products which lend themselves to dramatization. There should be an apparent reason for a mail purchase. To make this clear, You will find below a few suggestions for products which have been successfully sold by mail. Specialized books. There are many people who are always interested in books of a specialized nature. Some are men in technical lines of work who are prospects for valuable technical books out of print. Some are people interested in collecting first editions. There is an opportunity to compile listings of books, both new and second-hand, along 100 specialized lines. The catalog should be sent only to groups composed of people with known interests. A byproduct of such an activity, particularly if you live in cities such as London, New York, Boston or Philadelphia, is to purchase, upon order, tear books from dealers. A fee is charged according to the time spent locating the book in the bookstalls. Monogram specialties. Most people have a weakness for monograms. A profitable mail-order business supplying monogram cigarettes, matches, playing cards, bridge scores, place cards, tallies, glassware, stationery, etc., can be built up by catering to this interest. The same groups can be sold monogram shirts and wearing apparel. It takes a little time and requires some capital to get a list of buyers together, since you have to depend largely on small advertisements in class publications, mailings to club members, etc. But once you have a list of buyers, you have a business, because there is no end of things which can be sold through the personal monogram appeal. Arrangements can usually be made with manufacturers to fill your orders. You control the business through ownership of the monogram design. Homespun neckwear and bedspreads. In districts which are recognized as headquarters for certain kinds of craftsmanship, it is possible for a wide-awake person to make money marketing the local output by mail. At the present time there is a vogue for homespun neckties. In the same category come homespun bedspreads, hooked rugs, etc. While it is true, with the exception of neckwear, these products do not repeat. A person who buys her husband a tie can usually be sold a bedspread or a rug. In starting a business of this type, it is important to price your merchandise to allow for a high selling expense. People buy handicraft work, not because of price, but because of certain distinctive qualities. The price, therefore, is not so important as the proper dramatization of the distinctive qualities of the product in your sales literature. Distinctive confections. A young couple in New Mexico made considerable money selling cactus candies by mail. A wide-awake advertising man in San Francisco, who knew his way around the Chinese quarter of the city, built up a tidy business on rice candies, which he had made by the Chinese. A retired printing salesman in Florida took several $100s out of the North every year selling candied citrus peel in glassine packages. In each of these instances the undertaking succeeded largely because the idea of having candy that was different appealed to certain types of people. Here again success depends